He got a slam, right? Did we? See him singing in the top 40?
This is the top 40. Yeah, we saw that.
Top 40, and I think that's something to be really celebrated, but you're no longer in the top 40.
Will be a governor's choice. I don't know if he can win, but I think he's probably going to go on.
He's going to go on.
I mean, go on to have a career in singing. I don't think he's going to win, though. Some of the girls are just too good.
You were the first. Please just hang on. A joy and a positivity around you. It's emanating
the picture on the TV, but it's not very bright.
It's like Randy.
All right, guys. Today we're going to be talking about how to use hotkeys in OBS, the incredibly powerful feature that will allow you to do all your switching from your keyboard. I love it.
It was really executed flawlessly.
What you ask when you look at what all city banks say, it's what you ask when you look really quickly, this is great and for the workers.
And we're having a hard time getting them to really unanimously we get to what we're trying to get. We'll be singing very soon.
Area that's less susceptible. I think we could say they really worked very hard.
Really worked very hard. And so much credit for what they've done.
Yeah.
And we have others that haven't.
Also, on which there's smaller crowds in restaurants and bars.
But there's not going to be a new normal where somebody has been out of years.
Go down to the trying to listen to.
And now he's got 30, or he's got 60. Normal will be if he has 158 or 60 seats. And that's going to happen. And it's going to happen relatively quickly, we hope. But that's our normal. Our normal is if you have 100,000 people in an Alabama football game, or 110,000 to be exact, 210,000. Normal is not going to be where you have a game with 50.
I mean, states are doing really well on the
screen. Leave it alone.
Leave Jack alone.
Oh, yeah. Hi, excuse me, is this meeting on Zoom?
Yes.
Hello? It's a Zoom, so you can get on it.
So I can
We're
just
we're having a hard time getting on.
say it's closed now.
Yes,
Oh, it's easy just to slide it.
David Kalman.
How do you mute it?
What do you think I can impact on this? No, they're not. I have it muted.
Because in 2 weeks and 4 weeks and 5 weeks, they're gonna need ventilators, not because they need them right now. And we were right on our cats, and nobody that wanted a ventilator didn't get a ventilator. Plus, we have additional, if there is a surge, we don't, there's not gonna be a surge at all. But we're gonna be able to build up the stockpiles of states. And we're also gonna have a big stockpile of the federal government. We'll be able to help foreign countries.
They want to mute your microphones.
Countries will never be able to build a ventilator. It's tough stuff. We're uniquely talented in the sense that we can do things that nobody else can do. And we'll get right back to you, Josh.
Good evening, everyone. This is Ken Corson, the Harbor Master. It's not quite 7 o'clock yet, so we're not starting the meeting. But there's a lot of people on this call, which we appreciate. We're happy to have your participation. If people can just mute their microphones if you haven't already, that will help us out when we start the presentation so everyone can hear. And sections will be presented, and then we'll open it up to people to respond. So for the time being, if you can just mute your mics, we'd appreciate it. We're going to wait a little bit longer here, probably just a couple minutes after 7 o'clock. So if people are trying to chime in and they're running a little bit late, they'll have the opportunity to join the meeting before it starts. Thank you.
It's a terrific guy. He's looking very hard. Democrat. But we get along. He's looking very good.
Oh, God, you can see all the people that are on here. Yeah, I'm in as Maureen.
You're going to see everybody and they're going to see you?
No pictures, just names.
Yeah.
These are the people that are on. Yeah, right.
I lost the screen.
Mary Ann, I see you.
Wait a minute, I was muted. What happened? I lost you, David. Who was here?
Who was it?
David Giordano.
Oh. What's this call from? What's this one? That one?
I've never been on. I have no idea.
No, this.
Voices. Okay, they just opened it back up. They muted us. We
Okay,
can't
good evening,
respond.
everyone. This is Ken Corson, the Harbor Master. It's
Harbor Master.
7:01. There's numerous people that still have audio on. If everyone could just mute their audio, I'd appreciate that so we can get going with the meeting. So it looks like Vincent, you have your audio still on. We're just going to wait another minute or so just in case anyone's trying to get logged on, and then we'll get going.
Hey, Ken.
Yes. Okay, so it's 7:02. It looks like we have all the audio under control. Again, my name is Ken Corson, and I'm the harbor master for the town of Hingham. I welcome you to this public meeting where we're going to discuss the mooring regulations and the World's End mooring plan. I'm sorry for this format. I'd much rather do this in person, but it's the best we're able to do right now under these the current situations. So I appreciate everyone that's here to join us tonight. I would like to point out that this meeting may be recorded. So just keep that in mind. The town's not recording it, but it could be recorded through other means. The way I'd like to approach this meeting is I believe a lot of people are here specifically to hear and discuss the World's End proposed changes. And again, I say these are just proposed. So we will discuss World's End first. We will look at not only the regulations, but a proposed mooring plan. And then after we look at the regulations in the World's End mooring plan, we will go on to the regulations for the rest of the harbor. I've broken out a couple of sections in the regulations that I think people will have most questions and comments on, specifically pennants in the inner harbor, anchoring, and then the dredging regulations section. Those are probably the next significant changes. Everything else other than that, I believe, is really kind of administrative, but we'll be able to discuss any of the proposed changes. We're only looking to discuss the proposed changes. If there's things you want to discuss that aren't proposed, we'll save those to the end if there's time. This is scheduled to be a 3-hour meeting. I hope we can achieve all the discussion we need to in that amount of time. So I'm gonna be referring to some documents. If you have the posting, it'll tell you where those documents are. But if you are on your computer and you don't have them, if you go to hpd.org, go to the Harbor Master page, and then go to the Waterways Regulations, and you'll see a section that says 2020 Proposed Mooring Regulations and Mooring Plans. And all of the documents that we'll be discussing or looking at are listed there. So again, that's going to hpd.org, going to the Waterways or Harbor Master page, Waterways Regulations, and then towards the bottom of the page, there'll be a section called 2020 Proposed Mooring Regulations and Mooring Plan. Does anyone have any questions regarding the layout of the meeting that you'd like to bring to my attention? Any quick questions before I start in on World's End? Okay, didn't hear any questions so far, so I'm going to proceed.
I don't know.
Participants.
That's the green boat. My friend, Dave. No, no.
I know who they are, yeah. I know that, yeah, they both will the
Yeah.
shrink wraps going, yeah.
Yes.
What happened?
I don't know.
Went to iPhone.
No, iPad.
And listen to this fucking guy just.
No, I'm gonna go in and listen to the meeting.
I know, but
Shut the fuck up.
Hey, Ken, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Ken, you're muted. If
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Mark Glennon, you have your audio on, if you wouldn't mind muting that.
Yeah, Ken, it looks like the host muted everyone, so maybe just make a reminder to have them all mute their audio.
Okay, I think we got them muted now. Okay, everyone can hear me. Where did you all lose me?
We didn't hear.
Right at the beginning, Ken. Right at the beginning. We could not hear the beginning.
The last thing that you talked about was the layout of the meeting, and if anyone had any quick questions about the layout.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about the layout for the meeting?
Yeah, I have a question. This Zoom meeting looks like it only holds 100 participants, and there are other people that are trying to get on that are unable to. I don't know if that presents a problem.
I don't think it presents a problem. I guess we can, we can consider that after the fact. But I think we're gonna at least proceed with this meeting. If we have to do something else, we'll discuss that later on. But I think we're going to continue to proceed with this. Okay, so we're going to discuss a couple different documents that are on our website. So if you go to hpd.org, you can go to the Harbor Masters page, Waterways Regulations, and then at the bottom of Waterways Regulations, there's a section 2020 Proposed Mooring Regulations and Mooring Plans. The first document there that I'd like to draw everyone's attention to, if you have access to it, is the World's End ACEC. So if you pull that plan up, what you'll see, this identifies what's called an area of critical environmental concern, which is most of the area once you enter World's End, going between the outermost drumlin of World's End that we talk about, and then the other point of Hull. Once you go in there, that's an area of critical environmental concern, and you'll see that with the lines that go through it. As you come into what is kind of the mooring area, you'll see to your left, I believe those are mussels, and then to the right are clam flats. And then as you get along the coastline, there's a whole bunch of protected mammals and birds areas. So the reason I bring this up is I want to try to help everyone understand some of the reasons why we're considering some of the changes in World's End. One of them being environmental issues. This is an important ACEC, and some of the numbers of boats in there present challenges to the wildlife habitat. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is there's a lot of safety. I've had a lot of people express safety concerns regarding the number of boats in there and the inability at times to navigate, especially when we approach low tide, and people swimming in the water, and people, like I said, navigating around the people that are swimming. So there's a lot of safety concerns. So those are the two main reasons that we've considered looking at how we regulate and manage the number of boats in World's End, from a safety perspective, as well as from an environmental perspective. And when we look at those together, ultimately what we're looking at is to try to actually improve the enjoyment ability of people to go there and enjoy World's End. Right now, people are enjoying it, but there's a lot of drawbacks, a lot of challenges. We've had a number of noise complaints late in the evening at night there. We have a lot of quarrels and issues regarding boats banging into each other. So right now we spend, on the weekends when it's busy, we have a boat designated in there essentially the whole time, sometimes two, that kind of go around and not only do pump outs, but address the issues that arise. So at this point, I'll take any questions specifically related to the ACEC chart that I have up, or anything that I just talked about. There'll be plenty of opportunity to discuss everything else, but if there's any specific questions about this, I'll take those now, and then we'll move on to the next section of the presentation. Are there any questions on that?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead with your questions, sir. If you don't mind identifying yourself so I can call you by your name, I would appreciate it.
Sure, David Giagrando. Can you comment now or at some point today regarding the environmental issue you mentioned? So for 50 years, boats have been going, or more boats have been going there and rafting. Has there been an environmental impact report that shows that there has been negative negative results from all that the mammals or the clams or what the beds or what have you have suffered from that?
Yeah, so there's
Or
no,
is it, or is it anecdotal? And then the second question would be, if part of this is regarding loud noise in the evenings, what has been considered about enforcing the rules around sound as opposed to the number of people that are out there?
okay, so when it comes to the environmental aspect, we have a pump out boat that works very diligently in there on the busy day. We are concerned that we don't get to all the boats, and we are concerned that, you know, people might be dumping, but that's not something we're able to prove. We obviously hope that that's not a case that takes place.
You get audio, we got nothing else.
So that's one aspect of it. The other is all the boats that anchor. There's a lot of anchoring that goes on, and having the anchors dropped all around, there's some concern that that might not be beneficial to the clams and mussels. So that there, and then also the large number of power boats that come in, not just in any one day or any given week or summer, but the cumulative effect over time of exhaust and so forth and fumes going out might have an effect. So those are just some of there's no concrete study, but that's just a little bit of, I guess it would call it anecdotal, the environmental impact. And
So-
yes, regarding the question about noise, that's something that we go out and address when the calls come in. We usually, if we can, we send the people home.
Okay.
The proposed regulations may or may not have a beneficial effect on that. We don't know, but we address those as they come. But we did have a large number of those last summer.
So of all the environmental issues you just mentioned, after at least 50 years that I know of going there, some of them are assumed, some of them are maybe, none of them are concrete. So you're looking to take away people's enjoyment of a limited period of time for something that you don't have concrete data for. Is that?
So I want to get into that in a little bit, because I think I want to have the opportunity to explain to everyone what's actually proposed. I've seen a lot of communications and emails from people come through, and I want to make sure everyone understands what's actually being proposed before, you know, we look at it as things that are necessarily being taken away. Okay, so we can address some of that when we get further along, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other quick questions regarding the ACEC plan or anything we haven't addressed? Okay, so the next thing I'd like to bring everyone's attention to, if you have access to it on our website, will be the proposed World's End plan for World's End. So I'll give everyone a moment to bring that up, as it might take a moment. So 10 years ago, we installed a mooring plan. There were already moorings in World's End, but we improved the mooring field, the location of the moorings. We set up a waiting list so everyone has a fair opportunity to get a mooring. There's a lot of people on the waiting list, and it's going to take a long time to actually get through the waiting list and get everyone a mooring. That won't happen for a long time. But what we've done this year is we've looked at the mooring plan that we've had for the last 10 years, and we've tried to improve on it. And what do I say we've tried to improve on it? We've tried to add additional moorings, still keeping enough space around the boats, but add some additional moorings so that we can take some people off the waiting list and also have additional transient moorings. Right now, we have approximately four transient moorings in World's End. And I'd like to increase that by maybe another 6. So we'd have a total of 10 transient moorings. So someone that doesn't want to wait on the waiting list or doesn't desire to actually have their own mooring, they might only want to go there for a weekend here or a weekend there. They'll have the ability to just rent a mooring for a day, for a weekend, for a couple days, whatever they desire. And that's through our through our online system, where you can go rent a mooring, and you could invite a couple of your other friends to join you on that mooring. So in the new mooring plan, we've increased it by the number of moorings by approximately 12, I believe. And anchoring is not totally being eliminated. If you look at the plan, you'll see a couple areas. So a lot of people have expressed that, you know, they want the ability to go to World's End, drop anchor, jump in the water, go for a swim for a short period of time, they don't want to have to rent a mooring or anything to that effect. So we've actually created a couple. There's two right here on the plan. You'll see on the far right, there's a tidal anchorage option number 2 over by where people associate with the rock. And then we've created another one on the left side of the screen, tidal anchorage option number 1. So we've created a couple anchorages where people can go there, drop their anchor, swim, enjoy, relax during high tide specifically, enjoy some anchoring. Now, if I draw your attention to where the mooring area is, you'll see that's where the deep water is. And then as you go out of the deep water, which is the blue, you'll see that there's some yellow, red, and then green. The green at low tide is land. It's positive. There's no water there. And then the red is very shallow. You have 1.2 feet on the average, I think. As you get into the little yellow there, you have about 2 feet. So you can see that the area is pretty well populated with moorings as it was before. We've only added roughly 12 or so, and mainly they're on the entrance areas. We haven't consolidated all the moorings. We've kind of added some more on the entrance areas to increase the number of moorings there. So, like I said, we're hoping to maybe have roughly 10 transient moorings scattered throughout the mooring area. Some additional moorings there to take people off the waiting list, and have a couple anchorage areas where people can come in and drop anchor at high tide. Now we'll open it up. I'm going to try to open it up to questions specifically about the proposed mooring plan here. I know people want to talk about the rafting and all that stuff, and I'm not trying to delay that, but after we look at the mooring plan, we're then going to go into the regulations for World's End, and we can, people can ask questions regarding all that stuff. But if anyone has any questions specifically about the mooring plan, the layout, and so stuff regarding that, I would love to entertain those questions or comments now.
Ken, I got a question on that. John Spadafora here.
Go ahead, John. Thank you.
Real quick on that is, I noticed the plan when I looked at it, like numbers have moved around. Will we be in the people who currently have a mooring? Will you be in the same location as you are now, or will you be shifting around with this proposed plan?
So most people will be, the plan would be to keep everyone where they are, but what I want to try to do is I don't want to just have all the transient moorings on the ends where people might come in. I want to have the transient moorings scattered throughout the mooring area so that everyone can try to enjoy this area. So, you might find yourself in a position relocated some, but if you're, in the bottom of the horseshoe, you should not anticipate that you're going to be moved all the way far out. You might be moved a mooring or two to the right to create one transient spot, so you won't be moved significantly. But I anticipate there will be some changes, maybe a boat or two position different.
Okay, I appreciate the answer to that, because I do know with some low tides we've had our running gear in the mud on certain occasions. So not that I'm opposed to being moved, just didn't know what the plan was.
Yeah, my goal is never to just try to completely change a location, but I think we'll see that a lot of the positions will change by some degree, just so that we can have the transient moorings throughout the mooring area rather than just on the ends where the new ones were added.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions on the mooring plan?
Yes, Ken, I have a follow-up question on that topic. My name is Kurt Kalustian, and you're mentioning that if the moorings are going to be moved, they might be moved by 1 or 2 or maybe 3 spots. Ours in particular were moved by 9, and I'm just curious, was there a specific reason for that type of large move?
In World's End, yours was moved by 9?
Yes.
Okay,
roughly speaking.
Okay, I'm not familiar with what precipitated your move and what happened there, but if you wouldn't mind following up with me after this, we'll try to figure out what happened there. And is it a new location, or was it just you renewed and you got a whole new location?
I believe the latter, renewed and got a whole new location.
Did you renew on? Well, why don't we do this? Let's you and I discuss that. Not after the meeting tonight, because this could go for some time, but let's follow up. If you can follow up with an email, I'll reach out. We'll discuss that and try to figure out what happened there.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
And if I can chime in,
Sure, absolutely. Go ahead.
the numbers are completely different now, and the reassignments are to be where people used to be approximately, but the numbers in the actual plan are different now.
Okay, so the mooring that you feel might have been moved by 9. If you look at the number on the plan, that doesn't, the numbers will be changing. So you're probably in the same location. It's just your number was changed, sir.
Oh, I see. Okay, then I will go back and reference any renewal paperwork to see if our numbers
Yeah.
changed.
Let's confer after this meeting, tomorrow or early next week to just make sure that that's the case. But with this new plan, Assistant Harbor Master Joe Driscoll just spoke up. All the moorings will get new numbers. So I guess what I'm anticipating is you're probably in the same area, but you just have a different number.
Okay, I'll follow up, and that might be the issue, and that helps to clarify. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's correct. We're going to have to make new assignments, new numbers for everyone with the new plan.
I have a question.
Okay, sir.
My name is George Saris. So did you say the moorings, the transient moorings are going to be only good at high tide?
No, the transient moorings will be good at all tides. So all moorings are positioned in such a fashion that at any tide, you'll be able to be on a mooring and have water. Now, we do have some very low tides where there's really no water in there, and that's just the dynamics of the area, but yeah, the moorings are all placed in deep water locations.
So I'm sorry, so I maybe I confused it then. So was it the anchorage area you said was only good at high tide?
Yeah, so that's pretty, yeah, so the anchorage areas, when you get to low tide, there may be no water or limited water, but that's kind of the case right now anyways when boats anchor, unless they anchor right next to all the boats in the middle. Those anchorage areas, as you can see, they're red and yellow, so they're really like a high tide anchorage area.
Yeah, I mean the problem is there's only water where close to the channel going in there, really,
Okay, and these are just some proposed anchorages. So if people are familiar with the area and would like to say, well, hey, why don't you have an anchorage area over here? This might be a good time to chime in if you have some comments. These are just some suggestions that we had on anchorage areas. If there's, some more thoughts on different locations for anchorages, I'm more than willing to hear what people have to say. And
all righty. Well, I'm good.
Okay. So now I'm going to go to the mooring regulations.
Hey, Ken, can I bother you real quick?
You're not a bother. You can go ahead.
I'm sorry. My name is Jim Kelly. I'm reviewing the anchorage plan, and I see that the southerlymost anchorage is quite a bit in the tidal zone. The Western Cove area seems to have more water in it. Would that be an area where anchorages may be allowed in the future?
So are you talking about the western section over by the red 8, the channel marker?
No, not that far out. You have a small cove that is by the causeway area there, and it looks like there's quite a bit more water in that area at tide, and I was just curious if that might be considered futurely as a anchorage area, because there is a lot more water there than in the current southerly anchorage area.
Okay, absolutely. We'll evaluate that as a potential area too. And I have some other thoughts of other locations. So again, these are just some proposed thoughts and suggestions, and we'll continue to look at, is there a better spot? And if people don't want to chime in on here, on any of these specific areas, feel free to email us, harbormaster@hpd.org. If you don't want to speak up here, that's fine. You're more than welcome to send us an email, and we'll also take those comments.
Ken, this is David Calhoun. I had a question on what's going to be the swing when the moorings are placed. How much room are we going to be left with?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time? It was a little broken up.
I'm curious as to how much swing we're going to have. I'm looking at a new 40-footer, and I don't know if it's going to fit on this mooring.
What size boat?
It's David Cowman.
Yeah, so you're
And,
looking for a boat less than 40 or less than 40 feet?
Yeah, let's say I'm looking for a 40-footer. Am I going to have the swing?
Yeah, so all these moorings right now are designed for a 40-foot boat. Now, don't panic. People do have boats larger than 40 feet. And this, the 40-foot radius all around the bottom of the horseshoe going up on the far right has been in place for the last 10 years. What's really changed is on the left side, they went from a 50-foot boat to a 40-foot boat radius. So we don't anticipate having any problems on the left-hand side. We haven't had any problems with boats 40 and greater at the bottom of the horseshoe or up on the right-hand side. So we don't anticipate any problems on the left-hand side. We've had, 50, 60, and 70 footers. People have seen the sizes of the rafts. So we don't anticipate any problems with boats 40 or 50 feet on these moorings at all.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I anticipate, even if we have the occasional 60-footer, which are much less rare, I think that these moorings will be able to accommodate them. There's usually people on them, and the boats do a pretty good job of swinging in the same direction, other than when it's dead low tide, slack tide. Okay, so we're kind of getting to where I know everyone's anxious to get to, so I'm going to kind of move this along from the map, but I felt it was best to kind of show everyone the mooring plan first. So we're going to go to the mooring regulations. We're going to start with section 15, which is the World's End mooring area. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each section. So I'll start with section 15A for purpose and expectation. And then I'll go through the other couple of sections. After I do a brief description or whatnot, then I'll open it up to questions again. And we'll do our best to try to make sure that everyone that has a concern has the opportunity to speak up and voice their concern and provide us with information that we can use as we consider these proposed regulations. Again, I just want to mention that these are just proposed. They're not set in stone. They're not something that is just going to get pushed along if the community really doesn't want them. I will absolutely be taking that into advisement here. So I'm not going to read the whole 15A purpose and expectation. I'm not going to read the entire regulations, but there's, the first change here is the boats can moor for more than 14 days. That's what it said before. Now we're looking at 14 consecutive days without prior harbor master written permission. So that's the change there. It goes from 14 days throughout the summer to just 14 consecutive days. We've never really had a problem. I don't think actually we've ever had a problem with someone being here for more than 14 consecutive days without harbor master's written permission. And then if we go down to, section 4 of 15A, section 4, anyone that violates any other part of these regulations, town bylaws, or federal law, or laws or regulations. So, you just can't violate any of the laws. That's part of this. So does anyone have any question on, this section here, section 15A, the purpose and expectation? Okay, so I don't have any questions there. If a question arises, we can always circle back. So we're going to go to section 15B, which is was termed waiting list. It's now assignment list. So this is a change that's throughout the regulations. We're just changing the termination from waiting list to assignment list. It's a lot of these regulation changes are kind of administrative. And one reason for this is, there might be a wait on waiting, but quite often it's really an assignment list. People are getting assigned quickly. The two areas that really have waits are in the Inner Harbor and World's End. So calling it an assignment list, so you'll see that change. Again, all new applicants for, yes, go ahead.
This is David McKay. I'm curious, what is the purpose of changing the name from waiting list to assignment list, and what does that do to people on that list waiting for moorings?
Yeah, so the main purpose for that is that we have a lot of people that are just going onto it for an assignment, and they hear waiting list, and they think, well, they're going to be waiting. So we're trying to just take away some of the mystification of that you're going onto a waiting list, and ultimately you're just going into an assignment list. you might have to wait. So for instance, if you're going onto the assignment list for World's End, there's no ready availability to just assign someone to a mooring because they're all taken, except for this year, we'll have some new availability. So, we've got a lot of feedback from people that they don't like the idea that it's a waiting list. So we're contemplating changing it to an assignment list, but there's no change in how the process will work. You'll still have to get onto the assignment list or the waiting list and then get assigned to a mooring. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So, okay, so that's the assignment list, and I'll move on to section 15C, which is all moorings are required to have a permit. And the big change that's in this section is I'm considering limiting the number of permits to that any individual or entity or person, and here we call it a person, but a person is any entity, any organization, one permit to that person or entity or organization. And the reason for that is, there's a lot of people on a waiting list. There's a lot of people that want to make use of this area. And the goal is not to prohibit people from using this area, but it's to increase the ability for people to use it, be able to use it in a way that they can enjoy it. So that's why we're considering reducing the number of permits that anyone can have from what it is currently. I believe it's 2 down to 1. I think there's only a couple organizations. There's definitely less than a handful. I don't think there's more than 2 or 3 that have 2 moorings in here. And with the size of the waiting list, I just feel that it's probably best to consider that everyone gets 1 mooring so that we can increase the ability of other people to get a mooring permit and share that mooring with their friends and enjoy the area. So that's the reason for that change. And if anyone has any questions on that in Area C, I would entertain those questions and comments now, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, Ken. This is William Dresser talking.
I will.
90 people.
I have a question about the moorings so in the proposal, you're trying to switch all the moorings to be ability to be rented. Is that correct?
No, so that's not correct. So right now we have 4 transient moorings in World's End. The rest of them are all held by permit holders.
Right.
So everyone that has a permit in World's End will continue to have that permit.
Right.
Unless you were someone or an entity that had 2 moorings and we reduced that down to 1 and you could only have 1 mooring. But other than that case, everyone will be able to maintain their permit, and we'll take some additional people off the waiting list and assign them to a new mooring location that we've created. But we'll keep maybe, I'm just guessing, I don't know what the number will be, but we'll keep roughly 6 of these new mooring locations, roughly half of them, for transient boaters. So we'll increase the number of transient moorings from 4 to 10.
Right. So there's only going to be the ability for 30 non-people that don't own moorings there to come in, is what you're saying essentially?
That's correct. So if there were 10 transient moorings and we allowed the rafting, which we'll get to, I know people are dying to talk about that. We'll get to it. If it did become 3, then there would be 30 people on transient moorings.
Okay.
Okay.
And that would be, so it'd be 30 plus however many other moorings there would be of boats in the harbor.
Yeah. So if we have 50, let's just say we have 50 moorings in there. If we put 3 boats on them, we'll have 150 boats in World's End.
Okay.
Okay. And we're getting down to what everyone's very anxious for. I appreciate your patience.
All right.
I have a quick question.
Thank you.
Ken, excuse
Yes.
me. My name is Vinny. I was curious about the people who do, like us, have more than 1 mooring. Are you going to be taking one of those away?
If we decrease the number that people can have from 2 moorings down to 1, then yes, then your club or you or whoever is the permit holder would
It's
have
the club.
1 permit. Correct.
Okay, so we have 75 boats there and we have 2 moorings. Could we just put them in individual names? I
So
mean,
you
it
can't-
seems kind of unfair, doesn't it?
Well, I guess I'm just trying to understand. So you have, what do you mean you have 75 boats at your club?
Yes, and we have 2
Okay.
moorings there now.
Okay.
And you're saying you're going to take one of them away from us.
Well, I'm not saying that I'm going to take it away, and it's just a proposal right now. But the concept isn't really just to try to take it away. It's more that
I-
your organization has a mooring, and there's a lot of people on a waiting list. I think there's more than 30 people on the waiting list, and the goal isn't to take it away from you, but the goal really is to try to give some other people the opportunity to have a permit there so that they can enjoy the mooring with their friends and their family.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to figure out what's gonna be the action. Like, we've already paid for the year, and
So
what
that's
would
still
happen
something.
now?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't know that you would lose a mooring this year. You've already renewed it. So you might have it for the remainder of this year, and then next year it might go up into the pool for an assignment from the waiting list. And I think it's very likely that before either one was taken away from you, I don't like to say taken away because I don't.
No, I appreciate that.
But we would discuss with you if you have two and say, okay, which one would you prefer to maintain? So we'll have that discussion with you before it happens. But we're not going to take, again, I don't like the word, but you're not going to lose the mooring if you've paid for the fee, and you're not going to lose the mooring and the fee. I mean, if the mooring goes away this year, you get your fee back. I think that's just fair. But
Okay.
those are some things that we have to consider when we get to the implementation phase, and we're not there. This is really just to socialize the concept and try to have people understand, and hopefully bring people on board. And if it's really just disliked, then we'll consider some other options. But we'll have that discussion with you before we go down that road.
I'm gonna actually reach out to you and give you my name and number.
Okay,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Vinny, if you don't mind me asking, what club is that with, just for my notes?
For your notes, it's Charles Gate.
Charles Gate. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Ken, may I make a point? This is Harriet Diggins, and I'd just like to say, when a club owns a mooring, especially one with 75 boats or more, multiple people get to enjoy that mooring. Whereas if a private party owns the mooring that's on a waiting list, it's a more limited number of people who get to go out there.
That was my point, Harriet.
Yeah, so that's a great point. But there might be another organization that's on the waiting list too that has 75 people that just don't have access to a mooring. And there might be 75 people at your club, and that's great, and we want you to come here and enjoy this space. But there might be a family that has a lot of friends too, and there's 20 or 30 people that are able to enjoy mooring. So we have
Well, that's how the club works too.
What's that?
The club works that way as well. They bring all kinds of friends and family. They don't just limit themselves to 75 boats.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but we have a lot of people on a waiting list, and I'm trying to look at ways to increase the ability for other people that don't have access to your club or a friend of your club or to that aspect. So I understand your point, and I don't disagree with it, but I think where we have a long waiting list, and people are waiting years and years, I just don't think it's fair for people to have to wait on a waiting list for forever for a mooring there. So I'd like to just have the concept of trying to get some people off the waiting list. It might only be 6, but 6 is a large number. We might have put 6 people in over the last 10 years, maybe more. I don't know the exact number, but it's not a lot. So if I can put 6 new permit holders in 1 year, I think that's a plus for the people on the waiting list.
I have a question.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, this is George again. So what about the people who have waited years to get their second mooring? I don't think it's right that would take it away. I think they should be grandfathered in if somebody has a second mooring.
So the people that have a second mooring, if my memory is correct, those were acquired 10 years ago at the very initial, when we first started organizing this area. So no one, to my knowledge, no one's waited years and years to get a second mooring.
That's not true.
What's that?
Not true.
That's actually
That's not true.
NYC took over 10 years to get a second mooring.
Okay, so someone did wait over 10 years to get us. And when did you get your second mooring, sir?
3 years ago? 2 years.
last season.
Okay, well, thank you for correcting me on that. I appreciate it. I wasn't aware that happened, but again, these are just these are, I appreciate your comment. None of these are set in stone right now, but this is what's being proposed. Again, I don't like to look at it as taking someone's mooring away. I really like to try to look at it as giving other people that don't have the ability to have a mooring there that are waiting the opportunity to have.
I can see moving forward doing that, but I don't see taking them away from people who waited for them and who have them already.
Okay, so that's a good
I can.
point. That's a good point, sir. And I know Joe's taking some notes, but I'm going to mark that one down.
Ken, if I could interject real quickly, we paid a fee every year we waited for that mooring to become available. Do you know where that fee was actually bookkept to? Was it to the harbor master or was it to the town of Hingham?
So all the revenues that come in don't go to my office. They don't go to me. The revenues go into the town of Hingham, and they're handled through the town finance, the town accounts, and they're handled through the advisory board and the town budgeting process. So this is not trying to be a revenue increaser. This is not me trying, or my department, or me as the harbor master, just trying to increase harbor master revenue so that I have more in my ability to spend. That's not the case at all.
Hey, Ken, Bob Moreau from Braintree.
Ken.
Quick, easy question. I mean, we've had 2 moorings there since the beginning. And my understanding is we made a sizable donation to the Preservation Trust at that time to get the 2 moorings. And now, rather than letting us keep our 2 moorings and being grandfathered, you'd like to take one of them away?
So I'm not sure what sizable donation that you made, because there's no requirement of any sizable donation for a mooring. So I'm not familiar with what that's about.
I'm not really either. I was told that by our club historian, to be honest with you. But at the same time, we've had 2 moorings. We share them with a whole lot of boats, as opposed to somebody on a waiting list coming in and going to use their mooring, one person every weekend. And I mean, why wouldn't you grandfather someone like us for being there all the years, paying the fees all the years, and basically being good neighbors out there? We do a good job. We let other people come on our moorings if no one's on it, and we're very open for people.
Yeah, so I just mentioned to the other gentleman that I thought that was a very good point, and I've made a specific note to consider that. So
Okay.
I'm taking your comment to heart, and I appreciate it, and it will definitely be factored in as the town moves forward. If we decide to move forward with any of these changes, that'll definitely be considered. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Ken, Dan Sellers here. I just wanted to make a note on what Charles Gate was saying, where they have 2 moorings and 75 members. And if you're thinking of moving the moorings to 3-boat raft ups, I mean, that's not only taking a mooring away, but really restricting a club's ability to be able to go out and enjoy.
Yeah, so we'll get to the raft up in a minute, and we can discuss that. I guess I'll just mention briefly that, and I totally understand your point, and we'll get to this shortly, but just to comment quickly, is I think we have to just try to find a balance between the ability to enjoy and, there's a balance between access and enjoyment, and we'll get to that in a minute. We'll have that discussion. I'm not going to try to avoid it, but I just want to try to stay on track here, because we only have 2 hours and 15 minutes to get through all this. So if there's no more questions on section 15C, I believe we just did, then I'm going to move on to 15D, which is renting. If everyone's all right with that, I don't hear any objections. So I'm going to move on. And let me just get some water here quickly, pardon me. Okay, so what this section, there's kind of a lot of changes here, but I'll just read what the new proposed part is, and everyone has it with them. I'm sure if you have a question, you're ready to go with it. But the new proposal will be that the fee will be per boat, and a reasonable number of vessels may be rafted, taking into consideration the vessel types, weather, and other factors, subject to the harbor master's exercise of discretion. No person, marina, or entity other than the harbor master may offer a mooring location for rent or lease in the World's End area. So, there's a bunch of changes here, but there's not really too much change to the section. We're still saying that, boats can be rafted. There's a fee for each boat, which is already the case. The fee is not set by me, it's set by the Board of Selectmen, but boats can be rafted, the fees per boat, and it's subject to the discretion of the harbor master. We're not talking about the number of vessels rafted yet, that's coming up, so just keep those questions to the next section, but does anyone have any questions on section 15D, renting? Okay, nothing heard. If something comes up, we can obviously return to it. So I'm going to move on to section 15E, rafting. So what we're looking to do here, there's mainly two changes. And we're looking to have rafting really strictly to the boats on the moorings rather than boats that are anchored. And we're considering decreasing the number of boats that raft from any number that that might work down to a number, whether it's 3 or 4 or 5 or 2 or 1. We don't know yet, but we've proposed 3. And I guess I'll just kind of give a little bit more background on this. So, I've got a lot of emails and questions from people. Well, why don't we just let it be whatever a safe number is and have it kind of be a situation that kind of works itself out. And if we need to, we'll go in there and address them on need to be situations. And that's what it is now. That's kind of what we've been doing. And it doesn't seem to be working. There's a lot of, for a number of years, we've had lots of issues with the rafts, the size of them, anchored boats in between with rafts, and they're the tide changes, it gets low, they're hitting, they're pushing, fending off. Then we have small quarrels sometimes and disputes, and people are trying to navigate around the big rafts, and they come around the corner, and then there's people in the water, or they're backing up and there's people in the water. So it's really kind of almost an overpopulation at times, especially on the busy weekends. So rather than have it be a judgment call where we have to send a patrol boat in, or quite often in the weekends we have 2 boats that really can't leave this area, one being the pump boat, and then usually a second harbor master boat that just kind of continues to go around and address situations and so forth. I think it's better, rather than have the subjective discretion of whatever harbor master or assistant harbor master is on duty saying, well, you're too big, and then it becomes a discussion. Well, that raft over there has 3 more than us. How can we be too big? It seems like it might be better to have just some sort of number that makes sense. And looking at the swing radius of the boats, the number of boats, we felt that 3 might be a good number. And a couple reasons why we think 3 might be a good number. One is if there's, God forbid, we haven't had a fire in World's End recently, to my knowledge, but if there were a fire, we do have medical issues, and I can briefly talk about that. But if there were ever a fire on a boat, you could break one, if there's 3, you can break one off on either side and leave the one on the mooring, or you can, it's easy to separate the boats. But if you have a raft of 15 and, 6 boats in, there's an issue, it can take more time to break apart. Now, I know everyone's going to say, oh, if there's a fire or a problem, we'll do it quick. I understand that, but this was just one of the things we considered. Obviously, we could have 4 potentially, and you could still break them apart quickly. But like I said, we haven't had any fire issues in here, thank God, and I hope we don't. We have had medical issues in here. I'm not going to come up with an exact number. I know that a couple of years ago, we had I believe it was actually on land, we had a woman, I don't remember the details, but cardiac arrest, and we had to evacuate her from land onto boat into Hull. And this was, a critical situation, and it was very difficult. I mean, we don't want to make a wake. We're not trying to make a wake, but it was just very difficult to get that person off land through World's End. It might have even been low tide. I don't remember all the details, but I just remember it was very, very difficult to get that person out of that area safely at a critical moment. Now, those things don't happen every day. Thank God. I'm glad of that. But, I do have to consider, the cumulative effect of if there is a fire, when we do have medical emergencies, when we have the number of people swimming in the water, what our what is the effect that all this has when we put the number of boats that we have in there. So if we had 3 boats, let's just say we have 50 moorings. I think there might be 51 or 2, but if there's 50 moorings in there with 3 boats on each mooring, that's 150 boats on moorings. Right now, at times we can have, I haven't counted recently, but we can have at least twice as many of that, I believe, on sometimes. And it's just, I believe it's just too overpacked. And I get a lot of people, fair number of people that are upset, that their boats are too close, and it's really taking away from the experience. So I'm trying to find a balance here of safety and enjoyment. And I think right now we don't have as much enjoyment as there could be. So I'm trying to find what that balance is. I think it might be 3. It's a proposal. But I'm gonna open it up to don't say anything yet, but I'm gonna open this up to questions. I know everyone wants to talk about this, so we're gonna take our time. I know this is probably the biggest thing for World's End, so we're gonna go through this. I want everyone that has a comment or a concern to be able to express it. And we're gonna take all this into advisement. As I've said before, this is not what's happening. These are just some proposals. And I want to hear what people have to say. So I'm going to stop talking right now. I've spent a fair number of time talking about the rafting. I'm going to open it up to the questions. So if there's anyone that has a question, I'd like to start.
I have a question, Ken.
Yes.
I have a question, Ken. My name's Dana Diggins. I'm the secretary at Charles Gate Yacht Club. There's a couple other members on the line in the call. And I've been going down there for 15 years or so. And we've experienced the problems that you're describing, there's no doubt. And, having 10 to 15 boats on a mooring is too much. And I couldn't agree with you more. But when we have 5 boats on our mooring, and some of the other mooring club owners have 5 boats on their mooring, it's really not an issue. The problem seems to come about when people drop anchor wherever they want. And that makes it difficult to proceed through the channel safely. So I would propose that you consider 5 boats per mooring and not 3.
Okay, that's a great comment, and we will certainly consider 5 boats.
Okay.
And I know that the boats anchoring in there is a problem. I don't like the idea of not being able to allow anchoring in there, but it's really hard to accommodate boats and moorings and anchoring in a mooring field. It is a challenge, but I appreciate that comment. Is there anyone else that would like to comment next?
Hi, Ken. This is William Dresser again.
I will.
Would there be any like issue with trying to propose an area for a proper anchorage in Hingham? Because from reading some of the legislate, you want to remove all anchoring in Hingham Bays?
Yeah, so I'm not removing, okay, so we're only talking about World's End right now. I know you're referring to anchoring throughout the town, but.
It was just on the same bill, that's why I brought it up. So.
Yeah, so I'm not looking to exclude anchoring in town by any means.
Okay.
We do have anchoring, mainly our anchoring is in World's End, but there are 2 sections on the current mooring plan that have some anchoring sections that we've proposed. We've had a 3rd location brought up that we'll consider. And there might be 1, 2, or all 3 of these. They might be changed a little bit. They might be a little bit larger. So we are considering having some anchorage areas in World's End that you wouldn't need permission to anchor there, because you'll have it. It'll be part of the plan, and you can just go there. You have your 20-foot boat. You want to go swim one afternoon, and it's hot. You want to enjoy World's End. You have a place you can go throw out your anchor and swim. So we do have a couple anchorage areas. Does that answer your question, Will?
Yeah, the proposal also would say that you would, if you wanted to anchor, you would have to notify you to anchor as well.
Okay, so that's so I don't want to get into anchoring because that's our next section.
Okay, sorry.
I want to just stay for rafting. So we'll come back to anchoring, I guess, in a little bit to answer that. But does anyone have any more questions on the rafting? I hope everyone understands where I'm coming from, but please feel free to speak up and tell me what you think.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Tom Reed. I'm Breaker Yacht Club. I've been going there for 30 years. We have 2 moorings down there. Sometimes we have 10, 12 boats on a mooring, and we might have 10 or 12 boats on another mooring. We'll bring the boats over and raft them together. Nobody's ever been hurt. I've had my kids down there. We've had the grandchildren down there now. They swim off the boats. We're boaters. We know how to handle boats. We know how to raft them properly. And there's never been a problem. I think this is really a grave injustice to try and put it down to only 3 boats per mooring in there. It's a very, very protected area, 360 degrees from all types of winds. I cannot understand why this is even coming up.
Okay, well, thank you for your comment, and we are proposing 3 boats. We've had some other suggestions of maybe 5. I've expressed, some of the environmental and safety reasons that have caused us to look at this. And if you need more background and would like to contact me again, I can go through all that information again. But I do appreciate your comment, and we'll definitely take that into consideration. Are there any other people that would like to comment on this section?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, sir.
Tom Banjo. I don't think it's one size fits all with the boats. The folks that are talking from the yacht clubs that have moorings, they typically have larger boats because they're staying over. I have a center console, 25-foot center console. Most of the people I raft up with have between a 20 and a 29-foot boat. And to me, I think there should be a distinction made because when you say 3 boats, 3 40-foot boats is the same as 7, 20-foot boats. So I think there needs to be a distinction made. The other thing I'll just point out, there seems to be a conflict between the renting provision, which speaks to a reasonable number of vessels, versus the 3 limitation in Section E. So I don't know if you're viewing it on the renting that 3 is the cap and that you can decide that less than 3, or whether you can decide that more than 3 boats go on a rented mooring. Wasn't clear.
Okay, so there was a lot in there. I'm going to try to make sure I get it. So when you talk about, picking, I'm just going to say, we'll talk 3 boats just because I've used that. So that's kind of a certain number. It's easy for us to manage. It's 3 boats. It's 3 boats. To say, you can't have a raft that's more than X number of feet wide is very difficult to try to evaluate. We've had the kind of rule that it's not supposed to obstruct navigation, but anyone that goes in there, you can barely navigate. So that system isn't working. So I'm just trying to come up with another system that would work, that's not very subjective, that's not going to engage us in a huge, long conversation. Well, that raft has more boats, and we're trying to explain to the person, well, they're smaller boats. But I totally understand your comment, your perspective, and maybe the solution is increased to a 5. But I guess I want to point out here too that what Section 15E rafting, if you read Section 4, what it actually says is no more than 3 vessels shall be rafted to a mooring without prior harbor master written permission. So I guess what the provision's really saying is, it's 3, but if you have a special occasion or there's a reason we need to put more, you're gonna have a bunch of small boats, we have the ability to give you that permission. And it doesn't mean that every time you want to bring 5 17-foot whalers there, you have to do it each time. We could potentially, give you the authorization for the entire summer. Now, I'm not trying to make a lot of work for my office by having to do lots of authorizations, but I think that bringing some more control to this, I don't want to say control, that's not what I'm trying to say, but bring some more organization to this will actually have less impact on our department, because right now we have 1 boat that's dedicated all weekend. Quite often we have a second boat, so we're tying up 2 of our 3 assets in World's End.
And Ken, let me ask you on written permission. Are you envisioning email as satisfying a written permission requirement in this bylaw? That if you email, that we wouldn't have to go to the extent of getting an ink signature from one letter to do that?
Ken?
think we lost the moderator.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I had a brief pause there. Something happened, but we're looking to have a simple way to authorize people. So it would be email. It could be, something that's simple. You send us an email and we give you the authorization. I mean, we want to keep it simple.
To that point, when folk, oftentimes it happens very spontaneously when people start rafting up, or it's people don't decide until an hour before. Is there going to be somebody literally on call all the time so that people aren't waiting to go out on their boat so that they can know they have somewhere to go?
Yeah, I think it's prior, so I think you need to plan ahead. I think it would not be practical on a busy Saturday to try to send us a communication or request authorization at noon and expect to show up at 2:00 and have permission. I think these are something you'd have to request ahead of time, and we would then issue authorization at that point. But I think whatever number we pick, whether it's 3 or 5, really the goal is that's really the number that we expect to have there. If we have a unique situation where someone is having a party and they want a few more boats there or something, but I don't anticipate that every weekend we're issuing everyone an authorization to have 6 or 7 boats there. That's really not the goal. It's really so that if there's a situation that people would like to have additional boats there, we have the ability to accommodate that.
So Ken, I'd like to make a comment.
Have you given consideration then to have footprints instead of as you were talking about it a little bit before? 3 boats rather than a number of boats. You have 120 feet of footprint. Everybody knows what their beam is. The groups can add it up.
Okay, we'll definitely take that into consideration. I think that could be challenging to manage, but I guess it's something that we could consider. And if it's something that works out for the people and it works for the area, we could certainly consider that for people to kind of self-regulate. I think that's a good, then I'll just have to try to figure out what a good number is, work with our engineers to figure out what a good width is. Okay.
But if you've said that 3 boats is the maximum, if that there's a reason for 3 size, then I would think you would have a footprint in mind already. Where does the number 3 come from?
Yeah, we did have a footprint in mind, but we also took into consideration the ability to easily break some boats off if there was a fire or medical. But if there's 5 boats, it's not that much harder to break off a couple either. It's when you get to the 6, 7, and 10 and that it gets a little bit unruly. But I think the footprint is a good concept, and we have that down. We'll definitely take that into consideration.
Ken, I'd like to make a comment, please.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Greg Walsh. I've been going down to World's End for 25 years or better. We all know that people that are anchoring in there amongst the moorings, they just drop their anchors wherever they want. Now you're talking about eliminating a lot of the anchorage within the mooring field. That in itself is going to give us a lot more room to move around and to be safer than what it is on any given weekend day. During the week, you can go there and you got the whole place by yourself, but it's the weekends and it's natural because that's what we're all working for. So I think you should consider, if you're going to eliminate a lot of the anchorage within the mooring area, consider more boats than 3 boats to a raft, because you're going to have more safety swing without boats dropping their anchor right in your mooring lines.
Okay, that's a good point.
Ken, this is Bill Conway from Wasagasset. Same thing as what all these other clubs have been talking about. We're talking 10 weeks of the year. We're all wrapped up, camaraderie between boaters. And I think the issue is that we're running into is those that come into the World's End area and just drop anchor wherever they want. That seems to be the problem that's causing the congestion.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue. That's why I'm looking to try to, eliminate most of the anchoring in the mooring area. We try our best to manage that, but once you address one anchorage that someone dropped that's not appropriate, they move somewhere else and drop an anchor. So we can chase that around all day, and our boat's just tied up, with a very unpopular job of telling people, sorry, you can't anchor here. And they say, well, I'm just going to be here for a few minutes. We're trying to swim. So I agree that anchoring is an issue, and maybe with the anchoring eliminated, maybe we can increase the number of boats to 5, or maybe we can come up with some number of what the width of the raft should be, and that's a good point. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ken.
Any other? Feel free. We got plenty of time here. We still have 2 hours to go. So
Yeah, Ken,
I have regulations to get through, but we have time to continue talking about rafting.
Ken, I'd like to add in again. This is Kirk, Commodore of the Watertown Yacht Club. Just to chime back in again, I echo the sentiment a lot of the other partner clubs that we have out there that have made comment thus far this evening about anchorage and size of boats and our ability to self-manage some of the moorings. Whatever the number might be, I'm hopeful that it's larger than 3, obviously. But I just want to pull back into the point that we are also a club that has 2 mooring balls as well. And if the decision is made to remove and replace or repurpose one of those balls, and we reduce the amount of boats to a single mooring, then we're really reducing our footprint from a participation rate. And one of our selling points, and being on the river, is the ability to get out and participate in some of what the Harbor Islands and what World's End has to offer. And from our perspective, that really reduces our footprint and ability to enjoy that location.
So I understand that, and I appreciate that, and I respect it. Again, I'm not trying to take it away from you, and I'm not trying to take a sales pitch for your club, a desire to be there, but I'm trying to open it up for other people. That's really what this is about. It's not taking it away, but it's trying to open it up for other people. But I appreciate your comment. We've received more of those. We'll take those into consideration if we decide to go forward with that provision, and we'll definitely take that under advisement. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and just thank you. And a last thought on that is, I know you're going to be increasing the public mooring accessibility by 6, I believe it was.
Potentially some number of that in that respect.
And I'm not certain how many clubs actually have 2 moorings like we do, but with the decrease of having a club own 2 moorings and the increase of 6, that's producing many more vessels to come into that location. And I would envision that the people that own 2 mooring balls today, who have been paying over the years, are grandfathered in as previously suggested, but the uptick in the 6 available moorings would hopefully replace some of the waiting periods that people have to own a mooring, but that they can come and use a mooring.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So there was 2 aspects to your comment. I was making a quick note there too. But so if we decrease the number from the few people that have 2 to 1, you'd want to be grandfathered, correct?
Well, I think it would be a fairer approach, again, from my perspective and probably other clubs' perspective that have 2 balls.
Okay, and I lost the second part because I was making a note, but if you could just go through the second part briefly.
Yeah, just the second part. If you're going to be increasing the amount of public accessibility to rent 6 additional moorings that could potentially host 3 to 5 more vessels, wouldn't that be in its own right taking care of some of the accessibility for people who are waiting on a list? I know they're trying to rent and own a mooring, but they would have access to these 6 additional moorings that you are going to be putting in the field.
Yes, so there would be access for people from the waiting list for some of the new moorings, and obviously if we decrease the number from that any one permit holder could have from 2 to 1, then there would be a couple others there. But you're right. There, with the increased number of moorings, we're going to be able to get some people off the list. That's absolutely valid, and that we'll consider that also. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ken, could I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. It's Conrad Langenhagen. Good evening, and thanks for running this. Just for the sake of discussion, to take the other side of this for a moment, if you seek to undertake
they won't. There's too many people there.
Sorry.
Brad Pierce was speaking there. He interrupted you.
Yeah, it's okay. If you're seeking this rafting plan or limitation, and eliminate anchoring in the middle of that as well, have you taken a look at the capacity of anchored boats that you would eliminate and see how that would map over to the proposed anchorage areas? And so effectively, what's the net total capacity for people that are, effectively short-term transients And have you thereby limited the ability for people to come in that don't have access to a mooring or friends that have a mooring?
Okay, I'm not sure I completely understood that. So if we eliminate the anchoring, the number of people that would traditionally anchor, are you saying do we have enough moorings for them, or
No. Is there enough capacity in the other designated anchorage spaces that I see on this map? So in other words, they're tidal and they're pretty small, and I'm just trying to eyeball, kind of the swing space of the moorings and see how many boats could effectively fit there. And I suspect it's a lot smaller than it currently can anchor throughout the anchorage.
That's absolutely correct. We're not going to be able to, the number of boats that come in there and anchor would not be able to fit in both or either one of the proposed small anchorage areas. But we look at those small areas as if someone in the local Hingham area, they have a small 20 or 25 foot boat and they're out with the kids someday and they say, let's go to World's End, we want to jump in and go for a swim. They don't have to worry about trying to, call the harbor master or get permission. I mean, that would just be a pain. They want to go swim. So we're trying to just create an area where people can come in, you have a space where you know it's going to be safe, you can drop anchor and you can swim. It is a little bit restricted tidal-wise. Tidal-wise, maybe we can increase it a little bit closer to the deep water. The way they were designed right now is so that the boats and the moorings won't interfere with the boats that would be an anchor, but maybe we can increase that a little bit so that people can, work with the boats that are anchored and the people on mooring so you could go swim. But those aren't going to fulfill the current use of anchored boats. That's correct.
Hey, Ken, one question. The rafting, does that apply to the back river up at the basin or out at Bumpkin or anything like that?
So we're just talking about World's End. So we're not talking about the back river. We don't have any issues currently in the back river or over at Bumpkin or any other area right now with rafting.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments on rafting?
Ken, I have a question. I'm Caitlin from Metropolitan Yacht Club.
Sure, Caitlin, go ahead.
So my parents have a mooring, and we typically have 3 people on the mooring. And I would like to be able to go over and check in with my parents during the day. I have a 20-foot Key West. Am I going to be allowed to raft up? And then all my friends have like little inflatables. Are those going to count as boats as well?
So we're not looking at counting the little inflatables. And let's say you have, let's just say the number was 3 and a 17-foot whaler showed up. I really don't anticipate that you're going to see us there saying that the 17-foot boat needs to go. That's really not the goal or the purpose here. The goal or purpose is really just to try to make the place a little bit safer, more enjoyable for the people that are there. So, the numbers, if the number was 3, it's 3, but if you have your 17-foot boat or a little 20-foot boat shows up and there's no problems, I really don't think you're going to see us there telling you got to get rid of the 17-foot boat. We have other things to do, and our goal really isn't, we know people want to just enjoy the experience, so we're not trying to make this be an unpleasant experience. So I don't think you're going to see us there unless there's a problem and we say, well, the boats aren't fitting for whatever reason, but I don't think that will be an issue.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions on rafting?
Yeah, Bob Moreau from Braintree Yacht Club again. I sit here and I listen to your logic, and in a lot of ways for safety, it makes sense. But if there hasn't been a problem over the years, except for maybe a handful of people, address those people rather than put these draconian regulations on everybody at this point. It just seems to me that things that have been going on out there for over 30 years, now all of a sudden we want to change it, limit a mooring to 3 boats, 5 boats, whatever it's going to be. I mean, if people are being unsafe, it should be addressed. If, people have been going out there regularly for all these years and never had an issue, I just don't understand changing the regulations at that point.
So that's a great question, a great comment. So we have been working to, like I said, we have at least 1, sometimes 2 boats in there on the weekends. We've been trying to address issues. I mean, anyone that has gone there in the last year or 2, or we know how packed it is, how crowded it is. Are you going around a corner with some boats and all of a sudden there's people in the water? It's just kind of become unmanageable, and when it becomes this apparent to me that it's a safety issue. I feel that I have to do what I'm doing right now, which is have this discussion, try to come up with a way that we can make it safer so that someone doesn't get hurt. I'm glad that no one's gotten hurt directly, relating to anything that we've discussed, but I am concerned that it could happen. And I've had lots of people express to me that it could happen. So I think that as the harbor master, it's important for me to do what I'm doing now, to come up with some suggested regulations, have the discussion, get some feedback, and hopefully, if we make any changes, make a change that everyone understands and will still allow people to have fun and make it a safer place. So we've tried to address these issues, but it's labor intensive. It creates a lot of our time is spent there when there's other things that we could do, and I think people would enjoy it if we weren't there so much, constantly telling them to take up their anchor, move, there's no space. So I guess that's my answer to that, and I hope that you can see it from that perspective.
And I hope that you can listen to our perspective as well, if you would, please. Thank you.
I absolutely am listening to your perspective, and that's why I'm doing this, because I want to hear your feedback, and I appreciate it.
Hey, Ken, this is Brad Pierce. Can you take a question?
Absolutely, Brad.
Can you explain the logistics about these anchoring permits? Will you be in your office issuing written permits 24/7?
So we're not on anchoring yet. We're going to go into anchoring in a minute.
Well, how about extra rafting permits that you said you need a written permit for?
Yeah, so as I said with rafting, the ability to, so if it's 3, if it's 5 boat, or if it's a 120-foot footprint, whatever that we come down, if we change anything, I don't anticipate this being something that, everyone every weekend is going to be looking for additional number of boats. That would just, if everyone wanted to have 7 boats or 15 boats, that would just defeat the whole purpose. I think the concept there is, if there was, the permit holder of a mooring had a bunch of friends coming over and someone just got engaged and they wanted to have additional boats, this gives me the ability to allow, in a unique situation, the ability for more boats to be on there than whatever number we choose, if we choose a different number. So that's really what it's about. It's not about us sitting at our computer all day every weekend so that everyone can email us and say, I'm coming in with 7 boats. Is that helpful, Brad?
Yes, I still wonder how you're going to get written permits in the hands of people that want to go rafting over there or anchoring over there, Ken.
Yeah, so the way that would work, if someone wanted to, if someone had, let's say someone got engaged and they wanted to have 7 boats on their mooring and the number was 5 or whatever it is, on that unique situation, they'd send us an email in advance, and we would have the ability to look at it and say, sure, we'll authorize that. But I don't anticipate this being something where we're going to have 50 permit holders emailing us on a Saturday at noon saying I'm coming in with 7 boats. That's not the, no one's going to be sitting at a computer to respond to that. These are for, like I said, special situations where we would have additional boats on moorings.
Okay, one last question. How are you going to enforce this, Ken? In terms of if you have a raft party with 7 boats and only 3 are permitted, are you going to ask the people to cast off, or going to issue citations, or exactly what is going to happen?
So I think when it comes to enforcement, I mean, if we have a regulation, let's just say there's 5 boats.
Yeah.
I don't anticipate that we're going to have people coming in there and putting 10 boats on a mooring, because the regulation is 5. And that would be the number that's set, and that's kind of, we're leaving it up to the people to really, that's the number. It's 5 boats, so we're not going to put 5 more on there, except for that special situation, on August 26th when someone got engaged and they want to have 10 boats on the mooring because of that. I don't anticipate that it'll be difficult to enforce. It'll actually, I think, be easier, because right now, like I said, we have 2 boats that are constantly moving around in there, trying to keep things safe, have this person that's got an anchorage in a bad location move to another. And then by the time they pull it up, and we move, someone else drops an anchor there. So I think it'll be easier to manage. And we have the ability to issue violations. Again, that's not the purpose of this, is not so that we can show up there and say, you have 2 more boats than you're supposed to. Here's a violation. That's really not the goal. I guess if there was a problem and people didn't know, we would do as we usually do, or I hope my assistants do, is educate the people, say, you know, there's a limit to whatever the number is. You know, you don't have permission to have that number of boats. You know, could you please break 2 boats free? There's a small anchorage over there. The boats can go over there. I think that's how we would handle it. Now, I guess if there was a problem and we had to write a ticket, we could. I don't think we've written, I mean, we know how difficult it is in there right now, and we don't write, to my knowledge, we're not writing any tickets for everyone that interferes with navigation. And we could do that for every boat that's anchored and every raft that has 7 boats on it. We could give them tickets for interfering that, but we don't do that now. So I don't anticipate that's going to be a thing you're going to see us out there writing tickets to everyone. That's not our goal. That's not our intention. And we don't want to do that. And I know the people don't want that. So I hope that answers your question, Brad. Okay, any other questions on rafting?
Ken, I have a question. This is Sue McKay. And you had mentioned earlier about the possibility of reducing the number of moorings if someone owns more than 2 moorings. If you were to take that second mooring, where would that go? Would that go into the transient mooring field? Would it be offered to somebody on the current wait list?
So if we decrease the number from that people can have from 2 down to 1, that would be a mooring that would then be assigned to someone that's on the waiting list.
Okay.
So the only way you can get a mooring in World's End is to get on the waiting list. The waiting list is public. Everyone can see it. You can see your position, and the World's End is pretty simple. If you're the next person on the waiting list and we send you an assignment to a mooring, you have the ability to accept it within a certain amount of time. If you accept it, it's yours. It's different than the other mooring areas where we might have a mooring that can only hold a 20-foot boat, and the first person that can be assigned to that with a 20-foot boat is number 3. So we actually take the 3rd person, but in this area, it just goes from 1, 2, 3, and we assign them in that fashion.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on rafting?
Ken, can you hear me? This is Dennis Knudsen, Town River Yacht Club.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of want to reiterate what everybody else has been saying about this rafting situation. I'm 45. I've been going to World's End literally since I was a baby. I think the issue, what I've heard from a couple of other people on board here, is not so much with the moorings, but more the people anchoring. And I think if we address that first and then think about the moorings later, I mean, the people on the moorings are, you might say, experienced boaters for the most part. They're held a little bit accountable for their actions up there because they own the moorings. They have something they can lose, whereas the people with the anchors who come in and just kind of drop where they want seem to be the ones that are getting in the way lately. And I understand your hypothetical situation of maybe an engagement party, but I mean, if we can all be honest for a minute, that's not how boating works. You buy a boat so you don't have to make plans, so that you can go out and meet up with your friends. I do envision you getting a lot of requests for mooring permits on Saturdays, Sundays, Friday nights, because that's typically how boating works. You go out with friends in the harbor, and then you come back to meet up with some friends from your yacht club at World's End. Maybe my kids want to swim with some other kids, and now they can't because we can't be on the raft because there's 5 boats there. I think we need to look at maybe the anchorage and the people coming in there just dropping anchor wherever they want. Maybe that needs to be addressed before we start looking at cutting back the number of boats on moorings. Just my 2 cents.
Okay, and that's a great point. So, maybe one strategy might be to, I mean, this is a mooring area. Typically in a mooring area, there's not anchorage. So maybe we eliminate the anchoring, and maybe all the permit holders and everyone, are able to kind of self-regulate the size of their rafts a little bit better. And maybe if we don't have to decrease the number. I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but that's a great point. And it's kind of been brought up again, and I appreciate you bringing it up, and we'll definitely take that into consideration.
And if I could follow up one more too, did you mention the environmental impact with the number of boats on a mooring as well? Did I hear you bring that up when you brought up the mooring?
Yeah, I tried to explain to everyone that this isn't just World's End, but it is what's considered an area of critical environmental concern. There's no concrete study that's been done to say that boating has an impact here. Typically what you'll see in this type of an area, you'll see a big, strong push for what's called environmental moorings. We have looked at the ability to include environmental moorings here, but they don't really work. So there are studies out there that say, boating and it has an impact on the environment. I'm not saying that that's, the number one reason, but I just want people to know this isn't just me coming here saying, well, I want to ruin everyone's weekend, which I think a lot of people might have had that feeling, but I'm just trying to explain that there are some considerations we're taking into its safety, and it does have an impact, could have an impact. It might be, maybe it isn't, but there is that potential there for it. So these are the different things we are considering.
If I could follow up on that real quick, as far as the environmental impact, if there were studies or data to back that up, and I'm not trying to be argumentative here, but if there were studies or data to back that up, it might be a good idea. Then I think we should bring up the environmental. But if there's no data to back it, I'm not sure we can really bring that into the argument on a fair basis. And also, as far as taking away a mooring from somebody who's been on a waiting list for years, and now they have 2 moorings, I mean, I kind of equate that to Town River has, we'll say, a 7-year waiting list right now. And if we've got a family with several members from that same family in there, it's essentially telling somebody, well, you know what? You've got too many members of your family in the yacht club. I want to let somebody else in, so we have to let you go. It's kind of the same thing. If you've got people who have waited on a list for years to get a mooring, and now you want to take those away to let other people's in, that seems like that's the idea of the waiting list. You wait for the enjoyment, and to essentially, I know you say you're not taking that away, but essentially that's what's happening here. If you decide to take away a second mooring from people who have waited years to get that mooring. So thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I didn't say that I wasn't taking away, because I know it would be taking away, but I guess I just didn't like the terminology of me taking something away. That's not really the way I was looking at it. The way I was approaching this and considering it is, there's so many people on a waiting list that it just didn't seem fair to have this many people on a waiting list when a person or entity has 2 moorings, and I could get some people off the waiting list. But I understand your perspective that if you waited a number of years, 10 or more or whatever it is, and you finally get your second mooring, that you wouldn't want to lose it. So I understand that. But I guess I was looking at it from the perspective is there's a lot of people on the waiting list. It would be nice to be able to get some people off.
And again, and I want to just follow up again by saying that I understand I kind of understand where you're coming from, but again, that's the idea of a waiting list and something being, I guess, kind of exclusive in a way, and it makes it exciting when you actually get to that point. Again, the waiting list at Town River Yacht Club is about 7 years right now, and there's a lot of people, my friends, that I'd love to get in, but you know what? I've told them the same thing. You're going to have to wait. So that's just my perspective.
Nope, I appreciate it.
I'm trying to be as honest and as blunt as I can in a very professional and polite way, I guess.
No, and I appreciate that, and that's why we're here. So
We've already
it's been brought up before, it's noted, and we'll definitely take that into consideration. So I appreciate your comment.
And David Puglisi with a comment.
Sure, go ahead, David.
I would just like to imagine the situation where the 4th person, if hypothetically it was 3, doesn't know that there's already 3 people there. It could create a potentially dangerous situation where you have a 4th, 5th, 6th person waiting to get on the mooring, and also some possible altercations. So I'd just like to consider that possibility as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. I guess if I'm thinking that if there were a restriction on the number of boats that were on a mooring, I guess if it was a club, I guess I would anticipate that they would have some sort of method to make sure that that mooring was shared, so there wouldn't be a quarrel amongst club members showing up at their own mooring. But it's a good point. And I didn't see it that way, but I will take that into consideration. So we've had a lot of kind of the same questions. I'm not trying to take away the ability of people to ask questions on rafting, but I'd like to try to move on to some of the other sections here. For the last section for World's End, we have about an hour and a half still left before the meeting. I think we'll time out. It might be able to go longer, but I like to keep it to ending in the next hour and a half. So if there's any questions that haven't been asked or someone just wants to speak up, please let me know if you have any more questions on rafting, and then we'll try to move.
At this point, I think the hot topics have come up. So some people may want to leave. Would you be able to share with us what the plan is for continuing these conversations or making decisions or votes or anything like that?
So there's no votes tonight. This is just, there's no votes to be taken. This is really just a public meeting for me to get feedback, socialize the thought, for people to understand what it is that we're trying to do. What we'll do is we'll take all this information. It'll be reviewed amongst the town administration, and then if we decide to go forward with any of these, we'll make that decision and it'll get publicized. There would probably be a presentation before the Board of Selectmen before any more decisions are made. But before we go forward with enacting anything, there'll be a revised set of regulations, proposed regulations put up for people to see. Okay, is that helpful?
Ken, real quick on this, just in case people do want to leave, since we've touched the hot topics, is there any place that we can, I'll wait until, I think that was Joe, until he's done. All right. Is there any place that anybody here listening can we maybe cut him off? Is there any place that anybody listening can email or write to with their concerns about this? So if it does get to a Board of Selectmen, if the people don't have a vote, we can at least voice our opinion and our concerns with them.
Yeah. So if you you can most certainly email at hpd.org. That's our email for the Harbor Master.
Could you repeat that one more time? That Joe guy was cutting over you again.
Sure.
Sorry.
It's Harbor Master, the word Harbor Master, one word, at hpd.org, for hinghampolicedepartment.org. And I guess I anticipate that we'll get a lot of emails, which I encourage and I think is great. If you can just kind of keep your email to what your concern is and maybe not have 10 paragraphs of editorial. It's not that I don't want the editorial, but it'll make it easier maybe to kind of get through the material so we're not missing things. It's not that I want the editorial, but I think if you can just express your concern, then it'll be easier for us to manage them, because I anticipate we'll get a lot of information through this. I mean, you're obviously welcome to email members of the Board of Selectmen. If I tell you to email them, they might not be happy with me. So I guess I would encourage the information to come in from me. I obviously will talk with the Board of Selectmen. They'll be aware of people's concerns. If a couple of people can get together and maybe rather than sending 50 emails, they can send one and list a bunch of names, that's fine. But I guess the best way would be harbormaster@hpd.org.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, I mean, this affects all of us, all the yacht clubs, and I think we should all be allowed to join this meeting. It doesn't seem fair, just to talk about it now and not have not be involved with this. We're the end users here that are filling World's End. You're saying from 300 boats to 150. That's a huge change. Plus anchoring. We should all be allowed to come to this meeting.
And on that note, Ken, I also want to throw out, again, this meeting was restricted to only 100 people. Again, that doesn't seem like we're going to hear all the voices of everybody involved here. I envision, 100 people on a weekend at World's End would be welcoming. But, I figured I'd see 300-400 people on this. But again, with the limit of 100 people, it really doesn't give everybody the opportunity to voice their concerns.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I appreciate that. That's a good point. I don't know how the maximum number on this is designed. It wasn't set up by me, so I'm not sure how that was restricted, but we'll take that into consideration. I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to try to move on now to the last section for World's End, and then we're going to go through the regulations in their entirety to some extent. But the last section for World's End is 15F. It's anchoring. So anchoring is allowed, but there's no anchoring without prior harbor master written approval. So you'd need to get permission in writing to anchor, and there'd be no rafting on anchor. I think that's and obviously you can't interfere with the other moored vessels and so forth. So I guess we kind of covered some of this, but I know some people want to talk about anchoring, so I'll take anchoring questions.
So if we do anchor, we need to have a written permission?
So the concept here is that, we're trying to not really have the anchoring in the mooring area. Traditionally, a mooring area, you don't have boats anchoring in it, boats on a mooring. So I don't anticipate that we're going to have really people looking to anchor. Maybe you have a situation where someone doesn't have a mooring and they couldn't get a rental that day, but they really wanted to come there for a unique situation and they wanted to anchor, or outward bound comes in and they need to anchor a couple boats in a certain area for a period of time. So it's not really designed to have 100 people emailing every day to go in there and anchor on the weekends. That's not the purpose of it, but it's rather than just saying no anchoring at all, it allows me to have the ability on certain situations to approve anchoring to take place.
Okay, so hypothetically, if we anchor on the 4th of July weekend, we should expect a harbor master to pull up to the boat and ask for a written permission that we can anchor.
On the 4th of July?
Or any busy weekend.
Yeah, I get, there would be no, we wouldn't expect to really see on an average weekend, we would not expect to see anchoring throughout the mooring area. We expect to have that occupied by boats on the moorings, rafted. So I would not anticipate going in there and seeing, 40 boats anchored. Anchoring really isn't allowed unless you have special
anchor
permission.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm not able to pull up, I'm not able to pull up the chart with the anchorages showing that you have talked about, but I'm wondering, is the anchorage that you're talking about or trying to prohibit anchoring in and where notice would be or permission would be required to anchor in, is that only in the horseshoe? Because I have a sailboat and my friends and my son has a sailboat, and quite frequently on the weekends we anchor off to the side. I guess it would be the east end, a little outside of that rock and down before the entrance to the rest of that river, the Ware River it is. And we do that at low tide, and we often spend Friday night and Saturday nights. There are several nights there. There's never an issue with the tide. We have a low draft boat, and occasionally we will raft one boat with us or two during the daytime, but usually not overnight. We'll separate for nighttime because we're worried about dragging. So are you counting that area as well as part of the World's End area, or is that?
So what I would recommend, if you can't see the chart now, if you can get someone to help you after the meeting, you go to hpd.org, go to the Harbor Masters page, waterways regulations, and then at the bottom there's the proposed regulations in the chart. When you pull up the chart, there's a line that goes right across the top. I guess it's magenta. So that line goes across, and it's basically right at the edge of the channel, and from that line down is the entire World's End mooring area. So there would be no anchoring in there unless you're within a designated anchoring location. So if the place you're talking about is, I guess, north or above that magenta line off to the right, then and it's not in the channel, then you'd be able to anchor there.
Okay, yeah, there are two red marks, but I don't remember what the numbers are, but one is at the entrance to the horseshoe, and then the other one I know they're really marks to get into where Jake's is, but there are those two red marks, and we usually try to anchor in between them, keep being sure that our boat is not in the channel or so is in closer to the land in between them. But that's the area.
So those red markers are channel markers. They're red nuns, and they're basically where that line is for the mooring area. So it's basically those two markers and south. So I guess if you're north of that and you're not in the channel, but there's not a whole lot of room there.
Yeah, we do. Well, we actually anchor there frequently, and there's never a problem. We spend evenings there, overnights, and we found a lot of times that we anchor there, and smaller boats like not cabin cruises, smaller walk-arounds and cuddy cabin boats will come and anchor for the day and then swim and leave. And so for the overnight, there might just be one or two boats, and there's always plenty of room. We're not interfering with anyone on moorings or any rafting situations. And I just hope that we can, and we often do that on a very spontaneously, depending on the weather. We might suddenly decide this is a great night to spend at World's End. So I'm hoping that this isn't one of the areas that we would require permission to do that.
So it's hard for me to tell exactly what you're talking about, but I will say that when you have time to look at the chart, and for people that have the benefit of looking at it, we have 2 proposed locations. We had another gentleman propose another spot to the left of Anchorage option 1. One other thing that's not indicated on here that we did consider and is still being considered is making another anchorage on, I guess, just beneath the 2 channel markers, kind of in that orange and red area. Obviously, it's somewhat tidal dependent, but I think that's probably where you're talking about. We did consider having that be an anchorage option, but we felt that people might want to be more kind of down in the horseshoe area where it might be more enjoyable and conducive to swimming. So,
Well, we do anchor there all the time, and we swim there, and we just hope that we're going to be able to continue to enjoy that. And we often, our kids often join us there in their boats, and sometimes, as I said, they will raft with us in the daytime and then separate for the evening, because we do not like to be on an anchor rafted, and just to be safer as far as dragging goes, potential dragging.
okay, I'll definitely consider that.
Ken, I'd like to piggyback on that statement, if I could, please. This is Stu Brown talking. So I am looking at the chart of the proposed mooring field, and just to the right of the red nun number 10 along that magenta line, as you mentioned, I see there's 5 moorings, specifically 3 along the magenta line. I believe those are probably 3 new moorings. Can you confirm that, or maybe 5?
Yep, that's correct. You're going to see the new moorings are typically kind of on the ends of the horseshoe where you come in. That's where a lot of the new moorings are. So that's
okay, well, that's where she's talking about. So where those 5 new moorings are, or at least the outer 3, that's where she's talking about, where some of the deeper draft sailboats or power boats would anchor outside of the channel, barely in the horseshoe. I would, for the record, just say that, I do understand not allowing anchoring in the horseshoe in between the moorings and so forth. That can cause chaos. As far as having designated anchorages in tidal areas, I mean, that's useless in my opinion, with all due respect. I do feel that it would be necessary to have a designated deep water anchoring area, and maybe that's where it should be, in that little triangle area where there aren't currently moorings.
Okay, so the concept might be to eliminate maybe the 5 new moorings in that location and just have that be the anchorage area because it's deep water. So I completely understand. I know a tidal anchorage area is not ideal by any means, but I guess what I was trying to create was, I don't want people to lose the ability to on a nice Saturday when it's high tide, say, hey, let's go in there and drop anchor and swim. And I know that people want to try to get down to the bottom of the horseshoe. So that was what I was trying to achieve by having, some anchoring options there. But I understand your comment that maybe, having some deep water anchorage is a good thing. So we'll definitely take that into consideration. I guess what I was looking at is that there'd be some moorings there that people could enjoy instead of having to anchor. But maybe we don't put all 5 moorings in, and maybe we keep a little anchorage there. So that's a great comment, and we'll definitely take that into consideration.
Ken, this is Christy Brown. I just want to, I agree with what Stu just said. We have a sailboat with, and we couldn't get to either of those, the 2 anchoring areas that you've indicated. But I also want to clarify something with you. Is anchoring overnight allowed anymore under the new proposed?
So anchoring,
Section 9.
What we prefer people to do in World's End is, rather than just being on anchor, usually at night people clear out and there's some moorings available. So we'd rather people get on a mooring than just be anchored.
But just so that I'm clear though, Section 9 seems to say that there's no more overnight anchoring allowed anywhere in Hingham waterways.
Okay, so Section 9. So I'll kind of address Section 9 because we're on anchoring in World's End. But with Section 9,
Joe.
I'm going to kind of jump out of the World's End here and just jump into anchoring So you're referring to the anchoring overnight provision. So currently,
Right.
what the regulations are is you can anchor in Hingham waters for up to 48 hours without permission from the harbor master. What we're considering is to have any overnight anchoring. We're looking to maybe have people get permission for the overnight anchoring anywhere in town. Now, why would we do such a thing? So I guess the first thing is we don't have tons of people that are anchoring in Hingham overnight. We mainly, if we do, it's in World's End and some stuff in the back river. But I guess there's two main reasons that have kind of made this kind of come to light. And one of them is we've had some instances, specifically this past the summer. It's mainly evolves around safety, where we have we got a call maybe 1:30, 1 in the morning, and the gentleman's on his boat, and his boat's sideways. What's that? Okay, we had a gentleman who was on his boat anchored. It's like 1:30 in the morning. He anchored in a spot where his boat was on the side, and he calls us. His boat's on the side, somewhat panicked. So we have to race out there at 1:30 in the morning to find where this guy is. He doesn't know where he is. We don't know where he is. So we're searching the harbor to find him. And I'm thinking it would be really nice to have had this person just let us know where they are, so that when there's a situation, we can locate them easily. So after we find this gentleman, he came in from out of state, and he's here for a court appearance, and it would have been really nice to have known that the gentleman was in our harbor versus find that out in the middle of the night. So that's one of the reasons there. And then we had another gentleman this past year who ran his boat up into conservation land because of an impending storm, rode it up into conservation land and was at anchor. And he was here less than 48 hours. And, he could sit in the conservation land with his boat and ride out a storm on the Bouvet property for 48 hours because he was at anchor. So these were the kind of two reasons that came up that I felt it would be good to know in today's day and age. It would just be good to know where people are in the harbor. Now, if you have if your friend shows up and they have a 17-foot whaler and you anchor it off your property, I mean, you're not going to find us out there the next day trying to find the owner of the 17-foot whaler to give them a ticket. That's not the goal here. The goal really is just so we know that the people are in the harbor, where they are, and if there's a problem, we can find them in a reasonable fashion.
So they're looking for an email or something to get permission to anchor up the back river overnight?
Yeah, so if you're going to go up to the back river and you're going to be there over the night and you have a bunch of people, really all it is just send us an email and say, hey, I'm going to be up at the back river.
Ken.
Can I make a suggestion?
Hold on, can I just answer that question first, please?
Go ahead, sorry.
So if you got 10 boats up there, you just send us an email, say, hey, I'm going to be up there with 10 boats. These are the names. And then if God forbid, if there's a problem, there usually isn't, but if there's a medical emergency and you would know where you are to give us a description, but a lot of times people don't. It just helps us know that the people are there and we can get there in a reasonable fashion over.
I mean, just a thought. There's dozens of boats anchoring up the back river every weekend. I mean, that just seems like a big burden for you guys.
Okay, so maybe if you anchor in the back river up there, you don't need to get permission. Maybe it's that's a good point.
Ken?
Yep, go ahead.
Again, the only concern.
I have a question.
Hold on, the gentleman that was asking that question.
Yeah, just the only concern there. The only concern there would be that the regulation isn't written to allow the back river or anywhere else. I mean, the regulation is all encompassing.
Yeah, so this is just like a proposed regulation. So I'll take your comment and that will be considered if we do decide to decrease it from 2 days. If we do decide to decrease it, that would be taken into consideration. And
either that or make that a designated anchorage, which
exactly, or maybe we just leave it at the 2 days. Everything that's just proposed here doesn't mean it's happening. I want everyone to know that.
Okay, thank you.
These are just some solutions to some of the problems that we've developed. We're socializing, we're getting feedback. Maybe it'll stay at 2 days.
Excuse me.
Maybe it'll
Can I put my 2 cents in?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Just for everyone's mindset,
with the written permission and it being a burden on our department, it's a bigger burden to be called out at 2 a.m. for an unknown vessel, where it is, how many people are on it, if it had sank, anything like that. That's more of a burden than answering an email.
Can I make a suggestion about the anchoring?
One second, ma'am. 1 second, ma'am. So I just want to follow up on Joe. Joe had a really good point there, but I just want to clarify it a little bit. It's never a burden for us to come out and help someone in the middle of the night. That's not what Joe means. Joe just means it's easier to say, yes, absolutely, go anchor over there. We appreciate it. Now we know you're there. And when the problem comes up, if there, God forbid, a problem does come up, we can it's easier for us to get there, to locate it, and to get out there and help whoever needs help. So that's what he means. Not that it's a burden. I don't want anyone to think it's a burden for us to go out and help people. It's not. That's what we do. We enjoy it. We're glad to help people. Okay, so there was another.
Yeah, no, sorry if I was unclear. I mean, the burden is the search. It's not us going out there, but it's more effort to go out and not know where to go than to actually know where people are.
Yeah, and you weren't unclear, Joe. I just wanted to make sure that no one misinterpreted it. That's all. I think you were very clear. I just wanted to clarify it. So that's a great point, Joe. I appreciate it.
So I have a question about the sending an email. There are times when 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll be on our boat and say, hey, let's head over to World's End. Let's spend the night there. We'll be on anchor in that designated area that I just mentioned that Stu Brown told you about. Now, can I send an email from my phone and say I'm heading over to World's End now, just so you'll know where
I don't think that on your way to World's End on a 4 o'clock on a Saturday would be a great time to send us an email for permission. Now,
okay, well, I want to say one more thing about your example with the one man on the side and somebody else. I don't know what he did. I feel like we are the ones that are going to suffer the consequences because of that man's poor boatmanship skills. And in fact, maybe you should send him to boating school or some other option and let us continue to practice safe anchoring and enjoy the anchorage as we have for the past 50 years.
So that's a great point, and I appreciate that. I think that's very well said, and I respect that. But I also think that this is a benefit for you, ma'am. If you're on the boat with, let's just say it's you and some family members, and God forbid anything should happen to someone on the boat, and someone on that boat calls for help, but they don't know where they are, and they call myself or they call Hull. It's going to be very hard for that person who's unfamiliar with the area to be able to articulate where you are in Hingham or Hull, and for us to get there in a reasonable amount of time. So I totally understand what you say, that you're an experienced boater, and I appreciate that. But quite often, the experienced boater is the one that has the problem, and then there's the guest on the boat that don't know where they are. So if we have a guest on a boat that calls up and we can say, what's the name on the back of your boat? And they can tell us the name on the back of the boat. And we know that that boat is in World's End. Then we can get there in a much more responsive fashion versus taking potentially several hours to locate. Usually not, but it could. So I appreciate your perspective, but it's really to protect everyone. It's not for that one-off boater. That's just an example of where we say it's really nice to know where people are. So that's my comment on that.
Okay, my comment is most boats nowadays have GPS readings, so they can send you their coordinates and you can find out where they are pretty quickly.
Absolutely, and that's taking into consideration that the people on the boat that aren't having a challenge are able to operate a GPS and understand where the numbers are and so forth. Now, these don't happen every day. I don't want everyone to think that every day we have a problem. And we don't have that much anchoring in town. For the little bit we do have, I don't see it being a huge burden for us. And it's really so a benefit for the boaters, so that we know you're out there and we can help you. Now, let's just say you don't call us in. We're not going to come out there the next day and try to find you and say, well, you didn't call us, here's a ticket. We're probably not even going to notice. We're not going to say anything, but it's really something we'd like people to do.
Okay,
and if there was a problem, then we have the ability to enforce it.
And one other thing about you knowing where people are, if they're on anchor and they send you an email. So if the new proposal goes in and there are 3 boats on a mooring, and they did not send you an email. So they have some kind of difficulty during the night. You don't know where they are. So what, I don't understand why there would be a difference between mooring, or why don't you have everyone that goes to World's End send you an email so that you will be able to find them if they have an emergency during the night, as opposed to only people who are anchoring?
So that's a great question, a great point. So everyone on a mooring doesn't have to call in, because you're on a mooring and you can stay there. You're not at anchor. But if someone has a problem on a mooring, we ask them, "Are you on a mooring?" Go to the mooring ball. Look at the mooring. What number is on it? Every mooring in town has a unique number. So if they go to the bow of the boat and they say the mooring is 377, we know exactly where they are. So we'll be able to. We don't need them to call in advance or get written permission, because we know what mooring they'll be on.
What if I just go out for an evening? What if I just go out for an evening cruise and then I hit a rock and I'm sinking? You won't know. Should I send you an email saying I'm going out for an evening cruise? And this is my flight, my float plan for the night.
If you think that if that would be we welcome float plans of all kinds. So if you're a boater and you're new to boating and you are concerned that you might have some challenges, you can absolutely submit float plans to us. We always take float plans. We encourage them for like kayakers and stuff. But anyone is welcome to submit a float plan that says, I'm leaving on this date, I'm going here and here and here, and then I'm going to be back on this date. And then if that was your situation, you submit a float plan to us, and then you're sailing along and you hit your rock, then you could just call us up and tell us where you are in your float plan, and then that would help us out. But that's kind of getting a little bit further from topic here. We're talking about anchoring, we're not talking about voyage plans, but that's a great point.
Ken, I got a question. The point was that the anchoring email and notification is ridiculous. That was the point. You missed the point.
Your point is what?
I appreciate that. Okay, Brad, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah. According to Hingham bylaws, is the gunk hole considered a mooring area? And therefore, why would you be able to regulate anchoring?
Yeah, if it would be it's considered a mooring area. That's correct.
It is a designated mooring area according to bylaws.
Well, it's a mooring area, whether it's designated in the regulations at this point or not. If it hasn't been, it's been added in. Let me just take.
Excuse me, this is William Dresser.
So one second, Will. So World's End mooring area is in there as a mooring area in the regulations. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Will.
No, I was just trying to get to the designation of it being a mooring area or not, because in the 1980s and all before, all the way up to almost 1700s, it was an anchorage as used for a safety hole. So that was my confusion on that, as well as any sort of use on these anchorage spots are only for boats that draw seem to be 4 feet and under. And my family sailboat draws 7.5 feet, so there would be no place in Hingham to anchor now with these new regulations. So I'm just confused on the goal of use of this area.
Yeah, so I guess the goal is still to have people come in, but to try to get them onto some moorings.
Right. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other questions on anchoring? If not, we have about an hour left. I'd like to try to.
Hey, Ken?
Yep, go ahead.
Ken, hey, Steve Migliaccio. We exchanged emails on the topic. Just probably more of a process question, because I think, it's clear that emotions are high on what some might perceive as a blunt force instrument on what is most certainly a problem in World's End. I think to go in there on a Saturday and Sunday and not observe it as a problem would make any average person fairly short-sighted. But the solution you've proposed to resolve the problem is a solution that spreads the entire week of usage, right? So the problem exists generally on a Saturday and a Sunday. You've eliminated the resource for anybody that wants to access World's End Monday through Friday, right? So I think has any consideration gone into possibly altering use on weekends when the problem is versus during the whole spread of the week? So it's really more of a consideration of alternate perspectives.
That's a great point, and we'll take note of that. I think that's a really great point. Maybe you could have anchoring allowed on a weekday and not allowed on the weekends potentially. So that's a great point. I appreciate that. I guess when it comes to weekdays though, I guess the reason I haven't thought about it is, if we have 10 transient moorings in there, there's usually a mooring that's available that people could make use of. So I guess anchoring wouldn't necessarily be needed, but it's a good point. We'll definitely take that into consideration. I appreciate that.
Yep, thanks, Ken.
You're welcome. Okay, any other last final questions on anchoring or anything else in World's End? And then I'm going to try to move on to the remainder of the regulations so we can
real quick, on the forward, a quick question.
Sure.
Just on the anchoring, if you guys did decide to impose restricted anchoring in World's End, would you put up some sort of signage so people would know that, or some sort of way of letting them know in those areas, and then designating the anchorage areas with some sort of signage so they know?
Yeah, signage is tough. To put signs on land, they'd have to be really big, and I don't think the trustees of World's End, would really want us. Trustees of the reservation would want us posting big signs. So there'll definitely be an educational process where we'll have to, first of all, we'll let all the permit holders know, and we hope that they would spread the word. We'd put some notices in the paper. We'll try to publicize it. There'll be, a period of us doing some education to inform people of what the anchoring policy is. But I think word will travel pretty quick. We have considered some buoys that would go on the entrances on either end of the horseshoe that would say.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. So that we do have, we do have a plan that if we do go forward with some sort of anchoring restriction, that we would have some buoys out there that would provide some information to as the people come in.
All right. Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I have a question. I'm from Metropolitan Yacht Club. How much is it the nightly cost for a mooring? And is it the same on weekends or midweek?
Yeah, so the rental fee that the Board of Selectmen have set is it's $50 for the boat on any day of the week. And it starts from, I believe it starts basically at 10 in the morning. It runs till, or it might start at 11 in the morning. It runs till the following morning at 10 roughly. So if a different person's coming in, the person will be off the moorings.
And is that per boat that's on the transient moorings?
That's correct. It's per boat.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to try to move on to.
Ken, can I ask one last quick question? Patrick Leonard here.
Sure, go ahead, Patrick.
How many boats do you envision being able to fit in the designated anchoring area?
That's really tough. The way we envision that is, we don't expect to see a keeled boat in there. We don't expect to see large power boats. What we were trying to create is an area where people, they can come in with their 20 or 25 foot boat with a couple of kids that want to go swimming. We didn't want to lose that aspect of World's End. So, I don't anticipate tons of boats there, but I anticipate that a fair number of boats would be able to come in and anchor up there at high tide and have the ability to swim and enjoy the area. But I don't exactly know. I don't really want to try to put a number. If I were to, actually say, okay, 25 foot boat and draw radiuses, it's going to be a very small number. But I think that people would be able to manage it themselves safely. And if we have to come over on occasion to help out, we would. But it's really for these small boats to be able to come in and at high tide and swim and enjoy the area. So not a ton of boats, but there'd be some that we'd be able to retain that aspect of World's End. Is that helpful?
Yeah. So I guess my question is, if you're not able to secure a mooring, are you just saying that you're better off elsewhere in Hingham Harbor if you want to go anchor up for the day and relax with family and friends?
Yeah, I mean, we do have some rental moorings. We have one or two rental moorings off of Langley Island, right along the beach there. So we do have some other places where people can rent moorings, and we would try to encourage people to use a couple of those.
But I'm just saying, just if you want to just anchor and not rent a mooring.
Yeah, I mean, during the day, right now people can anchor anywhere in town. all day. You can drop an anchor anywhere. Well, not anywhere, but within reason. Obviously, you can't drop in the middle of the boat ramp or in a mooring area. But can drop in a channel. But any place can drop in the water ski area. But in other places, there are places that you can anchor along the coast, and people currently do on the other side of World's End, on the shore there. We get some people that anchor there. We have some people go down to the back river. So there are some other anchorage areas.
And just my last question, I appreciate it. If you say you have 3 boats together and each has their own anchor, are you allowed to tie up?
We're not looking to have rafting and anchoring in the proposed regulations, but that's not something that, none of these are etched in stone. So we've already made note that maybe we still allow some rafting on anchor. People seem to manage it pretty well, so it's something that we could consider not having that in any proposed regulation.
Hey, Ken, Dennis Knutson with Town River again. I have one quick question. I don't have an updated chart in front of me, and I don't know this off the top of my head. Are any of these areas that you're speaking about, are any of those designated anchoring areas on the NOAA charts? And if so, how is that going to pose a problem for the recommendations or the suggestions that you're coming up with?
Yeah, so the ones that I'm talking about are not going to be, federally designated anchorage areas. They'll be locally designated. So in World's End, we have, 2 proposed anchorage areas. Those would be local anchorage areas. They wouldn't be a federally designated anchorage area.
Right. I guess my question was, are they already federally designated? Again, I don't know. So.
I don't believe so. I don't believe that there's any federally designated anchorage right now where we're talking about the World's End area. I don't believe there's any federally designated anchorage in there.
Okay, so we're not. I guess we're both not sure if there is. How do you plan to go ahead and
so
propose this?
I'm pretty confident that there is no anchorage there, but I'm just approaching it cautiously in case someone finds something there is. But before we did any of these proposals here, our engineering firm looked at this to see if there was an anchorage and what's there. I will go out and tell everyone, since it's come up, that where we currently moor boats is actually, I believe, a federally designated channel. So it's, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and again, I was just asking the question because I wasn't sure. So
yeah, so I mean, where the moored boats currently exist is technically a federally designated channel, and technically mooring and anchoring are not allowed there. It's something I'm approaching cautiously and trying to resolve, but I mean, anchoring and mooring has been here since before I was even around.
Right.
Not something that I created. It's just something that's been going on. The Army Corps does do their surveys. I believe they did a survey at least within the last 10 years, and they observed all the moorings, and they haven't, said anything about it. So I'm trying not to raise that as a huge red flag for them. But
right, I thought I was under the impression the channel went to the left and the moorings went to the right. I didn't think there was a channel over to the right. I thought it was strictly to the left, all the way up to the marina.
Yeah, that's the marked federal channel, but there is, according to our engineer, there is an unmarked federal channel that goes right down where all the moored boats are.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ken, quick question.
Sure. I'm going to try to have this be our last question on World's End.
Okay, thank you.
New question?
Go ahead. Hold on. We have one person. Go ahead, ma'am.
Sorry, mine's really short. So if we have to apply to anchor and then change our minds because as the weather changes or stuff, do we have to re-email you to say that we're not going to come anymore so you can give it to another person? Or
no, you wouldn't need, no, because there's not going to be so much anchoring that, if you leave, we have another person waiting to come in.
Yeah.
We don't have that much anchoring really especially overnight. We really don't have a lot of anchoring in town.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, one more question.
Ken?
Go ahead, Rob.
Ken, Bob Dresser here. I've been going over to that anchorage. I guess I'm an old man now, but about 60 years I've been anchoring over there and swimming over there. It's kind of the warmest water in the area. It's very nice. And now you're telling me that I'm not going to be able to anchor over there. The shallowest boat I have draws 6 feet. The deepest one's 7.5. I've never had a problem in the past. I haven't really seen any algae, any extreme changes in those 60 years at that location? Are you telling me I'm not going to be able to anchor? I choose not to rent a mooring, my local area, because I cruise and I pay for that elsewhere. Why are you doing this? Why are you pushing people out that don't want to buy or rent a mooring over there?
Yeah, so I appreciate your comment and your question. So, we're not trying to push people out. We're not trying to tell people no. We're just trying to balance the number of boats in there and try to improve the experience, because, the number of boats in there is significant. Anyone that goes near it knows there's too many boats, and it's created, it's taken away from the enjoyment. So we're trying to find a balance of what the right number of boats, how to better manage it so we can improve the experience, make it safer. So it's really not to tell you no. That's not the attitude we have or the perspective.
Well, I don't think forming a balance is throwing out people that have been there for the past 60 years. And second question is, how is this going to work with me getting permission from you so that I can anchor somewhere in there, probably aground at night from what you've drawn on the chart, when I can't even get a hold of you to get my mooring permit in time, paid in time, and I end up paying fines on it? How's that supposed to work?
Well, I'm sorry that you weren't able to get a hold of us on time to renew your permit.
Yeah, you never informed me. That's why. But
okay, well, I apologize on that.
subject.
But that's, we're trying to stick to the regulations here. So, if you wanted to anchor in there, then you would reach out to us, and we would give you
And when and how do I have
authorization to anchor.
And when and how would I have to do that?
Well, you could simply send us an email, and then we would receive your request, and then we would make a decision on whether to permit it or
And
not.
email me back while I'm out sailing on my boat making the decision?
Well, the whole idea is that you would do it in advance, so you wouldn't say that I'm sailing in from Bermuda right now and I want to go anchor in World's End. I mean, I guess you could.
Well, I have friends that have done that.
Yeah, absolutely. You could. You could send us an email from your boat. And we have the technology for that, but you could, the idea is that people would do it in advance, and we would issue the authorization. I mean, any of these regulations we can, it's a slippery slope, and we can kind of push the extreme.
Why do we need the regulation? That's what I don't understand. And why would you be forcing me to sit in the mud in an area that you designate for anchoring?
Okay, so I'm not going to force you to sit in the mud, and I've kind of gone through
from sitting in the channel where there's water.
Okay, so what I'd like to do here is I can see you have. Why don't you and I connect, Bob? Because a lot of the questions you're asking right now, I feel that I've already expressed that. So let's connect together. We'll have that discussion, because I only have about 45 minutes, and I want to get through.
Very good. Tell me a time and a place, and I'll be there.
Okay. Well, we probably won't be meeting in person right now just because of the COVID, but
Obviously.
we'll make a point a note to reach out to you on phone. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to keep okay.
Okay. If I can, I'm going to try to move on from the World's End discussion and kind of go through the rest of the mooring regulations. The way I'm going to do that. What's that?
A process question. This is Dick Mason.
Sure. Go ahead, sir.
Is it correct that what you're doing is developing a set of proposals that will have to be put in front of the selectmen for approval?
Yes. So everything that's being discussed here will be presented also to the Board of Selectmen.
And so that's a public meeting where all 100 or 200 of us who find this to be grotesque regulatory overreach will be able to speak, right?
Yes.
And then finally, could you reach out among the 70-odd people left here and see if anyone supports what you're proposing to do?
So I know that there are people that support.
Would you reach out to this group, the people to whom this was an important enough subject to be here, and see if there is anyone here who is supportive of what you're trying to do?
So I'm not going to be reaching out to the people that are on this call. We don't have a list of everyone that's here, and I'm not. That's not something I'm going to try to do.
Anyone speak up who thinks you support this.
so I don't need, so first of all, sir, I'm running the meeting, not you, and I'm not asking people to speak up. It's very clear that most of the people that are on this call, and I'm fine with that, are people that don't like this. Usually people that are fine with something don't usually entertain going to a meeting or speaking up when they're one of the few in the
I
minority.
support this. I support this because navigationally, it's hard to get out of there.
Well, I appreciate that, ma'am. I appreciate you speaking up. But like I was just saying, you know, I don't expect, you know, the few in the minority to speak up here and say that they support it. I have had people reach out to me and say they support it, and I appreciate that. Like I said, you know, when people don't like something, those are usually the people that are attracted to the meeting. And I appreciate that everyone that's here signed on, came here, listened, and spoke what they have to say. But you know, I'm going to have to try to move on from World's End now.
Point of order.
And go on to the remainder of the regulations, okay? Just so that we can wrap this up.
Point of order.
Well, go ahead, sir. What's your?
Eric Dresser here, member at Hingham Yacht Club, but a non-resident in Hingham. I just want to know that will we be allowed to speak at this selectmen's meeting if we're non-residents? I've heard a number of us in this meeting, and I want to know if we're going to be able to speak at that selectmen's meeting.
So that's a decision that would be made by the Board of Selectmen. I don't run their meetings. I can't properly inform you on that. Okay, but I can advise the board that people that are I mean, I believe they usually let people that are non-residents speak, but I can't go on record with that. I have to check with them. Making a note. Okay, I'm going to move on to the remainder of the regulations. And if anyone doesn't want to sit here for the rest of this, that's fine. You're welcome to hang up or to continue staying here. The way I'm going to do the remainder of the regulations, most of the changes I consider to be kind of housekeeping, not hugely effective of much of anything, except for a few. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of point out the ones that I think people are more interested in, and then I'll just kind of go through the various sections. So we had several people with questions regarding the 5-foot pennant on the moorings in the inner harbor. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that has been a regulation already for the last 10 years. That's the way the moorings are designed there. But it's not really just a 5-foot pennant. Really what it is, it's 5 feet from the mooring ball to the chalk on the bow of the boat. So if your cleat is 3 feet into the boat, you'd have like roughly a 7-foot pennant. Now, this isn't something that we go out there and measure people's pennants and know you have an extra foot. This is kind of a standard, a guide for people that set up the moorings, X number of chain, X number of pennant, and that way all the boats have roughly the needed swing radius to stay within their designated location. So this isn't a change. This is something that's already in the mooring design. It's just being articulated in the regulations and clarified. So you'll actually see that it says pennants shall not exceed 5 feet in length from the mooring ball to the bow chalk, plus to the distance from the bow chalk to the point of attachment on the vessel. So I know a lot of people had questions on that, and if anyone has questions on that right now, I'll entertain those. If anyone has questions regarding the 5-foot pennant in the inner harbor. Okay, I don't have any questions on that. The next thing that I was going to go over was the anchoring town-wide, but I feel that we've already covered that in our discussion in World's End. We kind of talked about anchoring, the concept of maybe reducing it from 48 hours without harbor master permission down to, if you're going to be here overnight, to let us know. It was really done it's being considered from a safety perspective so that we know where people are. Obviously, there's a lot of people that have a lot of boating experience and they come in and they'll be fine. That's the norm. That's what we usually experience, but we just felt it might be a good thing to know where people are so that if someone has a problem and the person with the problem can't articulate where they are or whatever it is, then we know where they are. But we could simply keep it with the 48 hours. Again, it's not to go out there and find people that have been here overnight and harass them. It was really, so we just know where people are. And could get there in a reasonable amount of time. Does anyone have any questions, comments that we'd like to discuss on anchoring briefly?
One question on anchoring, Ken.
Sure, go ahead.
If you're trying to ascertain where people are overnight, why can't you permit them to let them give you an email to say, I'm going to be at X location this night and I'll be leaving in the morning at such and such, letting them be able to decide last minute what to do and not necessarily have to wait for written permission from you?
That's a great point, sir. That we just put that they send a notification.
Right. Things are so transient boating wise, as far as if the moon is right, if the tide is right, if the wind is right, we might do X. You just can't pre-plan all of that. So it just makes it much more difficult to try to say, let's plan something 2 days ahead of time and wait for written permission to do that. If the goal is
that's really a great point, and we'll take that into consideration. I think that's a great point. I guess we were thinking, from my perspective, I'm thinking, that if we not only do we get the request, but we respond, that we acknowledge it so the person knows that we know, and then we make sure that our staff knows. But maybe if people send the notification, maybe we can still respond and let them know we received it. But maybe they don't actually need the permission, but maybe it's just the requirement that they give us the notification. So that's a great point, and we'll definitely take that into consideration. I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments on anchoring?
Yeah, Ken, my name is Brian Blair. On Jeff's point, even if you just maybe have a link on your webpage where you can go right in there and say, okay, I'm going to be anchored off this point. I mean, at this time, at this right around now, I mean, everyone has cell phones, and with technology, it's just as simple as making some type of website where we just have to click on it and say, okay, we're staying here tonight. And
Yep.
a lot easier.
Yep. No, that's another great point to kind of expand upon the previous comment. So I appreciate that. That's really great. Any other comments on anchoring?
Just one more thing on that.
Sure.
I think the biggest thing people are concerned about, I mean, listening to this, is the word written, where you need written permission. And I think that's really putting a lot of stress on people. And especially with boating and New England weather, everything's a lot of times last minute. Hey, yeah, we're going out. Yeah, we'll stay here tonight. The weather changed. I mean, it is New England. If you don't like the weather, wait a minute. I mean, we all hear that.
Yep. Nope. That's another great point. And maybe if we just, do like a notification, set something up like that, that's great. It would achieve the goal of us knowing where people are if we need to assist them. So, well noted. I appreciate that. Any other questions on anchoring?
Yes, Ken, Tom Van Gel, and just as a segue of putting stress on people, after listening to everybody, it just seems like the time is not right to be trying to implement these kinds of restrictions and regulations. We're in the middle of an unprecedented pandemic. We don't even know if we'll be in our boats on the water July 4th weekend. And then with regard to the size of the flotilla out at the Gun Cove, given the economic situation we're in, I'd be very surprised if we're at 70% of the boats that were there on a regular July or August weekend. People just are not going to be able to afford to put their boats in the water to pay for gas to come from Winthrop or Charles River or Winchester or wherever. It's just going to be a reality. It hasn't fully set in yet, but the unemployment rate tells you that it's going to be a tough summer for folks. And I just, don't think this is the time to divide us. This is going to be divisive. We're eliminating some people who, maybe they can't afford to pay $50 a day, or for whatever reason don't want to pay for a mooring fee. I just don't think it's the right time. And I think as I'm listening, there's a lot of knowledgeable people coming to us from other yacht clubs. I'm learning a lot just listening. And I think you could benefit from some input. There's some technical issues. Should we be looking at tonnage of boats per mooring? Should we be looking at beam width? Should we, what should we be looking at? Length of boats? There are a lot of technical issues that I think need to be addressed, and it feels like these are getting rushed through a little bit. I realize you've done a lot of work. I appreciate the job you have. I've been the beneficiary of your services. You have great assistance, and I know you've got a tough situation, but it just seems like this is a little too harsh to, I'm 56 years old. I'm not the Yahoo out there causing a problem. And all the people on this call are not those people. We're responsible voters. And it just feels like pushing these through with restrictions is going to be punitive to us who pay taxes and pay the mooring fees and pay for the privilege to be out there. So I'd like you to consider deferring this for this season and getting some knowledgeable input from the people who are on this call, who've made a lot of very good points. It just feels like we're kind of rushing to get this through. And frankly, I don't think you're going to have the problems you may have had last summer, because I just don't see that they're going to be anywhere near the same number of boats.
So, so that's really a great comment, and we're very in tune to, the situation with COVID-19 and the effect it's having on everyone. So, I guess I want to kind of go back to where I was at the beginning, and these are just proposals. Nothing here is being, pushed through. Nothing. It's not me that I'm just so like I have to have any of this. These were a lot of these changes are kind of administerial. There are obviously some that catch more attention and have more impact on people, and we might not be moving forward with any of them. And this isn't the perfect. Nothing's perfect right now in this situation, but we have been working on these for a number of months now, and it's quite possible that we'll see maybe some of these things being put in place. A small revision of the mooring regulations, for instance. A lot of this stuff is administerial, like we don't need people to send us self-addressed stamped envelopes anymore, but it's in here. So one of the aspects is to kind of clean up the regulations. And then I wanted to have, a lot of talk. I wanted to at least have the opportunity to get some feedback from people versus saying, I'm just not going to go forward with anything. So, there's a lot of people have expressed a lot of concerns. You might not see any of those hot ticket items like in World's End. Maybe none of those go forward. Maybe it's just some of these administerial things. Maybe we still allow anchoring, and maybe we just decrease the number of boats that are allowed on a raft. Maybe we don't do anything. So I really appreciate that comment. And, this is really supposed to be, it's just a meeting. It's informative for me to get the information. I appreciate it. I'm glad everyone signed in on a Thursday night. I'm sure everyone had other things they'd rather do. But I don't want anyone to think that this is it and it's happening. It's really just something we've been working on. Unfortunately, the COVID thing happened, and I didn't want to just drop it. I wanted to continue the process and get some feedback, because that's the most important thing for me. So I hope that helps to enlighten everyone here. It's a great comment, and very much aware of the situation, but I really just wanted to try to get some more feedback, because we've had a lot of great feedback. I see that we can definitely adjust some things, and I appreciate that. Whether it happens this year or not, I don't know.
And Ken, just so what my feedback is, that I think you could benefit from the input. I think if you selected a few of the people on this call who are very knowledgeable, that you could enact a regulation that is fair and that is safety conscious, that makes sense, that people could get behind, rather than creating divisiveness at a time when we don't need any more divisiveness.
That's great. So I guess, I'll just expand upon that. If anyone would like to, be able to expand upon these with me in the future, please let us know by sending us an email, and I'll definitely entertain that. I appreciate that. That's very, very well said. And I guess I'll just say briefly again that, none of this is like it's set in stone. This is informative for us to gather information, express, what it is we're trying to do, so people can hopefully understand where we're coming from. So I appreciate that. I do want to try to entertain questions on the remaining set of the regulations. Before I go through all the sections we haven't discussed, I just wanted to go to a new section, section 16, which relates to the dredging of Hingham Harbor mooring basin. This section of the regulations is basically the process the town has followed for the last 2 dredging cycles. And when we were looking at the regulations, I said, gee, it seems like we should have the process for how we deal with getting the boats out of the inner harbor and how we deal with it. We should have it in the regulations. So it's the process we've dealt with in the last 2 years. It's just kind of etched into ink here. So if anyone has any questions or would like to comment on the dredging section, I would love to entertain those comments now. Questions? Okay, I'm not hearing any comments there. So what I'm going to do for the remaining sections that we haven't discussed, I guess I'm going to kind of go through section by section and just kind of open it up if anyone has any questions. If you don't have the ability to question here, you can always send us an email. But if anyone has any questions regarding changes to authority and the enforcement, please feel free to let me know now. I'll wait a couple seconds. Okay, so no questions on authority enforcement. If anyone has any questions regarding the definitions and terms, we have added some definitions to clarify things. We've modified some. If anyone has any questions on the definitions, there are roughly 4 pages of definitions. I don't think there's anything in here that's overly shocking or controversial. Okay, so there's no.
Ken, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
No, what is it? Number 1, section A, authority. I don't know if I'm backtracking here. The harbor master may interpret these regulations and issue additional terms, conditions, and/or restrictions not set forth by these regulations. It just seems like a gray area to me. It seems like there should be some a little more specific there before something like that would be put into place.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Quite often I don't have an example right at the moment, but maybe Joe can chime in. Sometimes we have unique situations come up and we have to try to make a determination. And I can already do that, but I just felt it might be a good thing to put in there. Sometimes not everything is black and white, and you have to try to work through a situation and come up with a logical example. So a lot of this stuff is, these are mooring regulations, so it really deals with moorings and mooring tackle and administration of the moorings, the assignment and stuff. So it's already something that we have. We just figured we would try to clarify it in there. I guess I could see it being controversial, but I don't see it really having any detrimental effect on the boaters. I think the way we've operated in the last 10 years, I think has been, as I've been harbor master, I think it's been pretty fair. We work real hard to make sure we treat everyone appropriately. So I don't think anyone would see a change in service, but I appreciate you pointing that out. Okay, so we've done section 1, section 2. Does anyone have any questions on section 3, applicability?
Ken?
There's actually no changes to section 3, but go ahead, sir.
Back to his point on that first application of the authority. We're not saying you, but if that's in there and at a later date, someone gets in there who feels that he reads that and he can do whatever he wants to change things, I think that's more of a point. We're not saying you, we're just saying in general, it's a tough statement to have in there because it's just it's too vague, in my opinion.
Okay, so it's already something that I guess the harbor master has the ability to do and can articulate it if he ever needs to. So it's it's not necessary that it be there. It has to be in there. So I appreciate the feedback, and we'll definitely make note and consider that if we do even decide to go forward with that change or any changes. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's no potential changes to applicability. Does anyone have any questions on section 4, mooring and docking permits? Again, when I talk about questions, I'm talking about changes that we've articulated within this section. The big change that, as I look through here, really is the change from waiting list to assignment list. If people like the term waiting list better than assignment list, I really don't have a preference. We just had a lot of people getting confused. I'm going onto a waiting list, but I don't have to wait. So we thought that might be more appealing to the people. But if people like waiting list, again, it's not, I don't have a preference, but that's really the main change in there. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I'm not hearing any questions, and I'm just trying to look through that section myself, see if there's anything. Okay, I don't see anything else in there that I want to discuss. So we'll go on to section 6, which is mooring locations, mooring equipment rentals. Does anyone have any questions on section 6? Okay, and then there's section 7, which is mooring and tackle specifications, where we talk about pennants, the mooring buoy, winter buoys, mooring tackle. I guess with regards to winter buoys, we haven't decreased the ability to use them. We've increased it by allowing a more modern buoy that people have been looking to use. We've included that, which wasn't included before. Okay, no comments there. So then the next would be, okay, so I'll just comment on section, I think it's 5F. I'm sorry, I'm on 7F. Okay, so we had a bunch of charts for all over the harbor. We've really scaled it down to one chart. If you see changes in the mooring chart, if you currently have a mooring, you don't have to go out and get anything new. It's keeping up with what the standard that's already being used in the harbor by the mooring provider. So, if you see changes in what we're requiring, no one has to run out and buy new stuff. It's basically already what we're doing. It's just articulating it a little bit more clearly. Section 8, mooring inspection. Anyone have any questions on that?
Yeah, Ken, quick question on that. Is there a size limitation on that? Does it have to be over a certain size? What if it's like a little turnabout mooring?
Oh, for mooring inspection?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you have like a little small mooring off your property, like a turnabout, you don't have to hire a mooring provider. Quite often we'll let the person potentially inspect it, or will come out on occasion and try to help. It's really more geared towards the moorings that are in the mooring fields, where they have to be placed in a certain fashion, and they're holding larger boats, and there's other boats around them that if one person didn't properly maintain their mooring and something happened, then it has the potential to jeopardize lots of other boats. So in your situation, you don't have to get a mooring provider. You can reach out to us and we'll work through that with you. So we have a number of people that are on the coast that have small boat moorings, and we work with them on those.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We already did anchoring, so I'm not going to entertain that at this point. Section 10, town floats. Does anyone have any questions on town floats? Okay, no questions on the town floats. Then there's section 11, marinas. Anyone have any questions on the marinas? Then there's stray vessels. No actual changes to stray vessels. Section 13, obstruction to navigation. We're not including any changes there. Section 14, special situations. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Ken. This is David McKay.
Yes.
You basically crossed out the entire section related to South Shore Yacht Club, which sits right on the back river there, and half of our fleet sits in Hingham Waters. Is there a reason for removing that whole section there?
Let me just refresh my memory on this just briefly.
Dave, what section was that?
Section 14.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you pointed that out. I'm not sure if that was that might have been an accidental redlining, which I'll look at.
Okay.
And I think we took that out because it's covered under all vessels needing a mooring permit if they're in Hingham waterways.
Okay, so it might be covered under somewhere else. That's why it's removed there.
Well, if I recall, the reason it was put in there, there was significant discussions back and forth between the Weymouth Harbor Master and Hingham Harbor Master and folks requiring duplicate mooring stickers. So, you know, I'm not sure if it was maybe 5, 8, 10 years ago it was put in, but my recollection is that's why it was put in, for those reasons.
Yeah, so I'm very much aware of the way we manage the mooring permits, and especially the excise tax over there. There's no intention of changing any of that. We plan to keep everything going the way it's there. It's likely that this section was deleted right here because it's covered elsewhere, but I will look at that. And if it was accidentally deleted, it won't be removed from the regulations.
And we do appreciate that, but again, we're just concerned that the language may be there that doesn't support that.
Okay, that's well heard, and we'll make sure that there's proper language to continue the way we manage that area. We have no intention of changing that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And then we've already done World's End, we've done dredging, and then I guess we have penalties, review of local decision, and then conformance with existing regulations. Does anyone have any questions on that? And then there's something I will point out, because I just feel I want to point that out. Does anyone have any questions on those sections? Okay, so I do want to point out that in the dredging of the Inner Harbor Mooring Basin, if you take the time and you look at it closely, you'll see that there is the ability to have a fine for up to $300. That would be only in a situation where it's a dredging season, we're looking to dredge the Inner Harbor Mooring Basin, and all boats have to be out by October 1 for the dredging, and we have boats that have overstayed that October 1 deadline, that there could be a violation up to $300 in that situation. It's not for all the regulations, it's only in that specific situation in the dredging season. The last 2 dredging cycles, we've not had any problems with people vacating. We have not had to issue any tickets. So one might say, well, why are you putting all this stuff about dredging into the regulations? There's no problems. Well, I wanted to distill it into the regulations so that it's in there, so people know what it is. And if for some reason I'm not here in 10 years and we have different people managing the town, we'll have in the regulations the process we've used the last 2 times and has been successful. So if anyone sees that $300 violation, it's specifically related to the dredging, and we're not looking to change all the fines across town for everything. They still would remain at what they are at $50. So we do have 15 more minutes, and before I go any further, I want to thank everyone. We're not ending, but I want to thank everyone for spending the time here to hear what we have to say, what we've been considering. We've heard what everyone says. We've received emails. I anticipate getting emails. We welcome those if you feel the need to send it. And I don't want anyone to think that this is, what the Harbor Master has said is happening. I understand that, the point that was brought up about COVID, but we didn't want to have done all this work to this point and not have had the opportunity to discuss it, socialize, get feedback. I feel that that's the most important part of this. So we received a lot of great feedback. I anticipate that we will see something going before the Board of Selectmen regarding changes to the mooring regulations. To the extent of what it will be, I can say that if it comes down to ministerial stuff, I think that we should all expect that I might make those changes this year, or ask to make those changes. Let me clarify that. Request to make those changes, because there's just a lot of things in here that I think can be cleaned up. We don't need self-addressed stamped envelopes, and I kind of want to get that stuff cleaned up. Now, whether we go into, restriction of boats in World's End and anchoring, that this is just feedback we've received. I appreciate it. We're going to take it under advisement. We might not go forward with them. Maybe we go forward with a different variation. But if whatever we do decide to go forward, we'll definitely socialize. It'll go up on the website. But we do have 14 more minutes here. If anyone hasn't been heard and would like to be heard, I will sit here for the next 13 minutes until this ends. But if people would like to leave, that's fine too. And I appreciate everyone's patience and understanding and expression.
Ken, I have one more comment, please.
Sure, go ahead.
Not to backtrack again, but in reference to anchoring, specifically rafting on anchoring, I do understand the concern there. However, I don't think rafting on anchor should be completely outlawed. Example, my whole extended family are boaters and so forth. They may be at World's End. We may go take the kids over to see their grandparents and want to go raft up for lunch. They may be anchored, not on a mooring or something like that. I mean, maybe not spending the night on anchor rafted. Okay, I understand that. But I hesitate at the idea of outlawing rafting on anchor 100% for situations like I mentioned.
Yep. So that has been brought up before. I have noted that. I appreciate you bringing it up again. I totally understand your perspective and a lot of the other boaters' perspective on anchoring and rafting. So that's well noted.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns that they would like to express?
Yeah, Ken, I have a question to the process. Eric Dresser here.
Sure, go ahead, Eric.
Ken, I appreciate your sending out that letter, the email that let me know about this meeting tonight. Can I count on a similar type of email when what is going to go in front of the Board of Selectmen is finally approved and ready to go before them?
Yeah, so I'll definitely, we'll send out more communications. The goal here is not to try to, just put something in that people aren't aware. We want people, I want the feedback. Sometimes what I see and what I think is appropriate isn't really what the voters want, and I understand that. So we'll definitely send out more communications if this does go before to the Board of Selectmen so that people will be aware of it. But again, the Board of Selectmen meeting isn't my meeting. They do their posting, but we will make every effort, and we plan to let people know that it's going before the Board of Selectmen so that you'll be aware of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments?
Hey, Ken. This is William Dresser again.
Hey, Will.
Hey, I had a question about the town ramp. I don't know if that's technically in your jurisdiction or not. I'm just trying to figure out when it's going to be cleared because it currently has about 3 to 4 feet of sand on it. And I almost got stuck on it yesterday. And I'm sure there'll be other people that are going to get stuck in it trying to get in and out. And I don't know
Yeah,
if that's
so
overhaul or from the sand coming in. I know there's committees that are somewhat in control of the sand that come onto it. So
I have recently communicated that to the DPW, the town administrator, so they're aware that it needs to be cleared. The DPW is what they do that, and they're going to be trying to get down there as quick as they can. They're just a little bit tied up with cleaning up from the storm that just happened this past Monday. So they're trying to just get that cleared up, and then I think in a very short time frame they'll be down at the boat ramp. So you should expect that to be cleared relatively soon. I know they're just trying to, catch up from the storm.
awesome. Thanks, Ken. Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, any other concerns, questions? Okay, I'm not hearing anything else, so I guess I will end this public meeting. I really appreciate everyone's feedback. There was a lot of great information that I was able to gather that we will be able to review and definitely consider in any potential changes. So thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing people out in the water, and I hope everyone stays safe in the current situation with COVID-19. Thank you very much for participating in tonight's meeting.
Hey, Ken, real quick question.
Sure, go ahead, Al.
So just along the COVID issue for this summer, what are the plans as far as, obviously rafting up is going to be a problem under the current current guidelines, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, so
your thoughts
that's a great comment, and I guess I'm glad you brought it up. I considered bringing that up at this meeting, but then I figured maybe it's not best to bring it up right now. But there's still some uncertainty what the boating season looks like. I'm getting lots of questions about it. I have a lot of questions, so I understand everyone's question about what's going to happen now. Obviously, rafting in World's End during COVID-19 is should be a concern amongst all of us. I have seen some guidance that came through today that says, people shouldn't be rafting. They shouldn't be beaching their boats in a public gathering. So, I'm not really sure how we're going to handle World's End right now in regards to rafting. I mean, there is the possibility that maybe there isn't rafting this summer. That's not even something that here I am, the guy saying I want to limit rafting. I don't even want to tell people they can't raft in World's End this summer. That's not something that I want to do. But it has come up. I think the way we might handle World's End is we might really hopefully just try to leave it up to people to self-manage. That's, the way I've tried to do World's End the last 10 years, but it's kind of not really worked out too well. So I'm considering maybe just, attempting to try to let people manage. Maybe things will improve. But I really don't know the answer to that question. It's something that I'm thinking about every day and talking with other harbor masters and state officials and environmental police, trying to figure out how to manage. So, once we have some guidance, we'll send it out in an email. If there is restrictions on rafting or anchoring there, I don't want people to take negative offense to it. It would be guidance, and it would be something that would be decided on the Board of Selectmen's meeting. It won't just be saying this is happening. But that's a great question, and if anyone has any thoughts on this briefly, I'll absolutely entertain it. If anyone has any information I'm not aware of through a position, that would be great.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone want to speak to, boating and COVID-19 while we have some time left? Okay, not hearing anything. It looks like we've lost most of our participants. We have roughly 60. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the time, and I appreciate the information. I'm proud to be your harbor master, and every day, myself and my staff, we work hard to serve the community. Maybe you don't all feel that at the time, but that's really our goal and our mission, and that's what we're trying to do. So I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ken.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.